is a day that you have given to each one of us a chance to live a life that you require of us, a chance to live the purpose that you have made for us, oh God. And so, Father, we submit ourselves before you and ask you that you lead us and guide us by the power of the Holy Spirit. Lord, as we start this meeting, an essential meeting indeed, Father, we pray that, Lord, your presence will be with us. You'll guide our talk, you'll guide our thoughts, you'll guide our planning, you'll guide everything about this meeting, Father. And that whatever plans we come out with, Lord, they'll all be to give you glory and to give you honor. I dedicate every member who is represented here, every organization that is represented here. And I pray, Father, that you'll be with them and bless them in a special way today. We bless you, we glorify you, and honor you, Father. For it is in Jesus' name I pray and believe. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Lillian. We are so excited. I can see guys have logged in, guys from South Rift, guys from North Rift. We have guys from the Lakeside. We have guys from the Eastern. We have guys from the Central region. And I'm so excited. It's exciting to have all of you here. Thank you so much for making time. Thank you so much for coming. Yesterday, you were great. You participated, you were so engaged, and throughout the time you were present, and we truly, truly appreciate you. So just a recap, yesterday we were able to go through the global and the regional climate change discourse by Arnold. We went through the climate change response and governance in Kenya by Nicholas. We had panel discussions. We had youth and climate change from Stefan. We had sustainable energy and innovations by Katrin. We had the challenges and opportunities by faith leaders, by Charles Masharia, and all the other panelists, together with the keynote speakers that we had, Father Mutie, together with Joan, together with Thomas Lerenten. And I thank you all because we are learning, and as Elizabeth said, that this is just the beginning of our conversation. So today we take the conversation a little bit further, and we're going to have a session on climate financing opportunities and movement building by by Arnold. And then from there, we will have a question and answer session, and then a breakaway groups. So once you go to the breakaway groups, I ask you to be participative because we are going to depend on the answers that you will give us. So kindly participate actively and also share your thoughts together with us. Another thing is that let's observe all the rules for an online meeting. If you're not talking, kindly remain muted. If you have any question, write it on the chat box. We are closely monitoring. And also you can raise your hand. It's also acceptable. And then, yeah, that's all. Even the video, because of connectivity, if it's not that necessary, you can have your video off so that don't interfere with the connectivity. Later, as I said, I'll share the registration form. Please make sure you register because as we reimburse airtime, we shall be using that registration form. I noted there are people who attended yesterday's meeting and they didn't register. We will sort out that later. But for today, once it's shared out, kindly ensure that you register. I don't have anything else from my end. Maybe I can call a part of the team that we have been working with to say hi. We can start with Lillian. Lillian, kindly just say hi.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 2. We are excited and we really are looking forward to a better day today. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Lillian. Charles Masharia, you can say hi.
Morning, everyone. I'm glad to meet all of you, and I wish you a very blessed day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Nicholas, you can say hi to us.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Happy to see you and happy to be here as well.
Thank you so much. Sharon Linda.
Morning, everyone. Glad to have you back today and looking forward to having a learning time with you people.
Thank you. Sharon Kibor.
Morning, and nice
Sharon.
to see all of you in the meeting today. I look forward to an engaging day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. George Kimani, are you in a meeting?
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. Good morning to everybody, and welcome on board. Today is our second day. Wishing all of ourselves the best and a great participation to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rosalind Papella, YWCA, are you in the meeting? All right. All right. I hope.
No, she may not be in the meeting, but YWCA is well represented. I'm sure she'll be logging in later. But I'm part of the team, and my colleagues are also here.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michael. Any other person I have forgotten to introduce that has been part of the planning team? All right. Sawa. So thank you all. We can go now to the next session where we have Arnold. Arnold, hi. Hello. All right. It seems that he's not yet here. So in the meantime, we can have the rest of the members introduce themselves. So just a minute. I don't know which order to follow. We can have the NCCK group. George, you know the regions. I'm not sure about the regions, so you can just call out the regions and maybe a leader or a representative can shout out and introduce the members.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody once again. My name is George Kimani from NCCK head office. One of the teams that we have here, we have the South Rift team. Should I request them to introduce?
Yeah, we can have the group leader just shouting out like they're present. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Maybe I can start by introducing the head office team. I can see in the head office team we have Noel is on board. Noel can say hi.
Good morning. My name is Noel, Program Account Head.
Thank you so much, Noel. I know Phyllis Kamau is also trying to join in, and she's going to be with us shortly. Oh, Phyllis, have you joined? Okay. Then I'll go to South Rift team that is led by Solomon. Solomon, are you on board? Can you introduce us to your team? Or Leah? Solomon, we can't hear you. Okay, maybe I can hold on that and ask maybe Fidelia.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Solomon Cheriot from NCCK, based in Eldoret.
Yeah, Solomon, we are experiencing some network connections on problems on your end. Are you able to introduce the team?
Now a bit clear, I hope. I'm Solomon from NCCK, North Rift region. Chris will join in soon, but we have Reverend Chebi from Elgeyo Marakwet and also Reverend Misoy from Elgeyo Marakwet. We still have some church leaders from West Pokot still to join later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. David Njuguna from North Rift, are you on board? You can introduce us to the team kindly. Or the team from North Rift?
Jukola is from South Rift. We are from North. Solomon is from North Rift.
All right. Maybe let me go to Upper Eastern and ask Fidelia to just introduce yourself and any other colleague you may be having.
Good morning. My name is Fidelia. I work for NCSK as the program officer, and I'm based in Meru. Thank you, George.
Thank you so much, Fidelia. We are having some of our colleagues, like David is trying to connect, but he's been calling and telling me he's not allowed in. We need to look into that. Have I forgotten any other colleague of ours? Okay, maybe great. You know, we have many of them here on board, represented by Ilea Kimotho and David Juguna, as well as Reverend Grace, who are also trying to log in. Let me hand it over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, George, for that. I'm happy to hear we have people from as far as West Pokot. We can have ADS. Charles, kindly, just a brief introduction for the team.
Thank you, Susan, and morning, everyone, once again. For the ADS team, I'll start at the Secretariat. Can we have them introduce themselves? Dixon.
Morning, everyone. This is Dixon from ADS Kenya.
Okay, thank you, Dixon. Dixon is the one who is helping us to host the meeting, and we appreciate for the good work. Then there is another colleague, Sophie.
Good morning. I'm Sophia Gati. I work for ADS Kenya.
Okay, thank you. Those are the ones at the Secretariat, and myself, Charles Masharia. Then we go to ADS North Rift.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, Edna.
I'm Edna Maritim, ADS North Rift.
Okay. Have your other colleagues joined in from Turkana? Maybe you can introduce them. I don't seem to see them on the participants.
Yeah, I've also seen them.
Okay, fine. Then we can go to ADS Naika, Nairobi Kajiado region. I saw Matthias.
Morning, everyone.
Yes, morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Matthias Chege, and I'm happy to join the team now.
Welcome. Then there is ADS South Rift.
There's a colleague from Still Naika, and this is George Pinyata. And I know he's logged in.
George, kindly introduce yourself. Seems he's muted. Okay,
thank you, Matthias. I'm logged in and I'm happy to be part of the team.
Welcome, George. Then we can go to ADS South Rift.
Morning, everyone. My name is Mary Naikumi from South Rift ADS. My colleague, Reverend Kirui, will be on board in a few minutes.
Okay, welcome, Mary. Mary is our Executive Director for ADS South Rift. We are honored to have you in our meeting. Welcome. Then we can go to ADS Western. Isaac, where are you? Okay, since he's not logged in, we go to ADS Eastern. There is Lydia. Okay, not yet. We go to ADS Pwani. I saw Benjamin. ADS Pwani.
Morning.
Morning.
How are you? Yes, I'm Dondon Wekilfwara.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Dondon Wekilfwara from ADS Pwani. Are you getting me? I have my brother here. I think he'll introduce himself.
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Maita, working for ADS Pwani. I'm so grateful to be part of the team.
Okay, welcome ADS Pwani team. Any other person from ADS I've left out? Kindly introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Lona Wambui from ADS Mount Kenya.
Okay, welcome, Lona.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Susan. That's the ADS team.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to see you, Miri Naikumi. She was my boss when I was doing my attachment in Narok. Glad to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah. I can see Catherine is in the meeting. Catherine, you can say hi.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other staff from Mwangaza?
Today, sorry, today, no, it is only me.
Oh, okay, it's all right. I can see Stefan is also in the meeting. You can say hi, Stefan.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to hear you all, and I'm also looking forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other person I haven't introduced or any other organization that is not part of the ones that I have mentioned, kindly just feel free to introduce yourself or your organization. LWF,
Hey.
Lillian. Sorry for
They will
forgetting
introduce
you.
themselves. It's okay.
Morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Areba from LWF based in Dab, and I'm here with my colleagues. Allow them to introduce themselves also.
Hi.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Renny Edwin, LWF.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Caroline Wainaina, based in Dadaab, the area manager. Thank you, and I'm glad to be in this team.
Thank you.
All right, we have anyone else from LWF? We have DKH.
Yes, morning everyone. My name is Marceline Atieno from DKH. Thank you.
Susan, I think we are forgetting the YWCA family.
YWCA family, go ahead.
Yes, I'll allow my colleagues of the secretariat to introduce themselves because Roslyn has not yet logged in. She's at the field in Mombasa, but in the course of the day, she'll be logging in. But I can allow my colleagues to go in. Benjamin, you can introduce yourself. Lucy.
Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. I'm Benjamin Wakilo from YWCA Programs Office.
Thank you, Benjamin. Lucy, you can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lucy Ayako from the YWCA family. I'm based at the Nairobi branch as a field officer.
Thank you, Lucy. We have youths from Mombasa and Kisumu, and we have also a youth representative from Kilifi. Youth from representative from Kisumu, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. Maureen, we have two Maureen's, Magak and the other Maureen Wasonga. It's okay as they prepare. The youth from Mombasa, you can introduce yourself. Okay, they have not logged in yet, but they will be logging in. Kelly from Kenya Youth Climate Network, you can introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Robert Banda, representing the Coast Region, Kilifi County. Thank you.
And I'm Haduyu Michael Nyongesa. I work as the Programs Officer at the head office, Climate Change. Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad we have the face of Kenya in this meeting. We have people from all over. So if I haven't mentioned your organization, please let me know.
Nimeingia mzuri. Nimeingia.
Okay. Arnold, you can introduce yourself as you take over the next session.
Nikiweza kupatia 30 minutes, I'll be there.
Please mute everyone. The admin, mute everyone.
Okay, good morning. This is Arnold. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnold. You'll also now continue with the rest of the session.
Thank you so much. So the first session, just correct me, Susan, is the movement building, right?
Yes, it is the movement building.
Great. So I've been asked by Lillian. Clearly, I'm not the one with the name on the presentation, but just to give an overview of what I know around movement building, and specifically in issues of climate change. I'm happy you all can join us, and I hope you are all safe and that you had a good evening and that you're sort of getting excited about climate justice movement. So I managed to prepare a very brief slides to just start us off around this. They're not very conclusive because I believe the colleague who was to do it will have been able to build more. But you're all in this climate space, so it's possible for us to capture these ideas because we've been involved. So please allow me to share my screen. Please tell me if you can see from your end.
Yes, Arnold, we are able to see.
You're able to see.
Yes.
So I picked this session, and I'd like us to begin by looking at a few questions. It's called the mindset, and I don't want us to have questions now or answers now, but about the mindset of movement building or an advocacy. And the three questions that came in my mind are, do you want to be right or do you want to change? Is change your actual goal or is there something else? Then three, are you ready to make the score? Will you remain at the abstract level? So these are usually classical examples of three questions that come in your mind when you have to think about effective advocacy, when you have to think about changing, when you have to think about a movement building. And for us, we can ask ourselves to change. What is change our actual goal or something else? And when you say you need to make a score or remain at abstract level, what does that exactly?
I seem not to hear what Arnold is saying. I don't know if the rest of the members are hearing me.
Actually, I was just asking the same question. I seem to have lost him at some point. So, Arnold, if you can hear us, we are not able to hear you. Seems like he dropped off the call.
I don't know if it's my network or what happened.
We lost you at some point. You seem to have dropped off the call.
Ah, okay. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just share.
Okay, thank
you. Are you able to see? Are you able to see now?
Yes.
Yeah, we are able to see.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry about that. I actually do not know what happened because my internet seems to be stable. So, based on the questions that we discussed here, what are the prerequisites for an effective movement building or a movement that is out there to achieve any goal or changes in society, whether they are small, whether they are big? And these movements could be individual. Actually, if we were to begin from definitions, movements are just not about organizations with a manager or with a CEO or anything. It could be individuals. The likes of Greta Thunberg, she's a movement on her own, and many others. And one characteristic of many movements is they are usually not formed, to raise money. In some cases, they're just guys who are passionate about what they believe in and what they want to see in change. So I just picked a few prerequisites of basically an effective movement building, or what we call an effective advocacy. So one is, of course, you're saying if you have to be a movement that is reputable, if you have a movement that makes changes to how our policies and things work, we need to have a good access to political processes. And this is a question to us now, as ACT, Alliance Kenya Forum, as faith communities. Do we have access to political processes in our various jurisdictions, whether it's at the ward level, whether it's at the county level, whether it's at national level, at global level? Do we have good access to political processes? When you're discussing about NDCs, and we spoke so much about localizing our climate action, and seeing how global regional processes find relevance at community level, who are the forefront of climate change impact? Are we rightly in the right political spaces? And political spaces is not, it's not about BBI, it's not about all the shenanigans you're seeing. It's just about when policies are made, public policies are being made. When a county is developing their CIDP, when their counties are developing their public participation programs for their communities, are we as members of ACT Alliance, in whatever spaces we are in, whether it's in Marsabit or Pokot, at the table of these processes to be able to influence? If we are not, we cannot be able to come out and challenge the status quo. Then number two, do you have good access to right people? Do we have access to decision makers, guys who who influence, or guys who are able to make or take real decisions? Are we, even if, for example, if you look at the movements, and I'll share a few that I've managed to gather here, you realize these guys, had access to right people. They were in the right forums, they were in the right spaces. So as we think about movement building within ACT Kenya Forum and as faith communities, we need to ensure that you have good access to the right people. Because if we are talking just to people who, are just gatekeepers, people who are just not pushing agenda, we might likely not be able to achieve what we want to see, and therefore change will not occur. Then 3 is a real persuasive power. And, there have been a lot of discussions and, talks about how to be persuasive, and even books around it. But around as us as faith communities, as ACT Kenya Forum, as members of churches in whatever areas we come in, how persuasive is our power? And I know persuasiveness comes from an informed point of view. And that's why I was saying the science must be there, or the science is there, and we have evidence to back our arguments, and why we are calling for change, and why we are calling, for example, why the National Council has never sat, despite us guys being told yesterday it's one of the key institutions that exist. How real is our power to persuade, the duty bearers and even communities? So it's both ways. How are we even persuading communities to take care of, for example, forest conservation? And do they see the need for that? Then number 4 is a clear and robust message that can be, overemphasized. We need to have a message when we're talking about climate change, and we're talking about, locally led responses to climate impacts, and getting communities on board, and getting communities to engage with us and interrogate our strategies and our plans. Are we putting out the right message? Is this message very, clear? And the catch here is always, elevator speech. If you're to meet Uhuru, for example, right now, and you are just from this climate change workshop, in just, let's say the guy is going to 4th floor, what would be your message? The elevator speech. That's usually the thing around a clear and robust message. What will you tell him that when he goes back, he will call the Minister of Environment and tell them, hey guys, I hear the council hasn't sat and I'm the chair. What can we do about this? That's the kind of reasoning behind this particular point 4. Then, of course, we have to have a precise goal, a flexible strategy. Of course, we can't just go there with our minds, oh, we want this, and that's it. Any movement, any effective advocacy strategy has always room for change, because the context keeps changing, priorities keep changing. Even the communities that we serve sometimes have different needs, and we cannot just have a one-fit-size-all strategy. So we must ensure we have a goal, but our flexible our strategy to achieving that particular goal is very, very much flexible, so that we live with the current times and the dynamics that we face in our advocacy. Of course, proactive, intense, and continuous commitment. And I think when you look at movement building in Africa, you realize we have been proactive, yes, but we haven't been intense so much, and we haven't been continuous. We start off, we are very excited about things, we want to change and all that, but we are not intense that much. If, for example, look at Fridays for Future, which is one example of campaign movement that I'll talk about. Look at kids in Africa. How many of them left school to go to the streets to fight for climate justice? But look how it was in Europe. Of course, there are a lot of discussions around that, and there are obvious reasons. Probably the kids there have, they have good home, they are short of food, the education system probably is free, as guys are paying, and there's no way you can tell your mom, I'm not going to school, I'm going to the streets, yet she's paid school fees, for example. So those are examples of movement building. And you look at movement building in Africa, things have not been very rosy. We've started very great movements, but they have all died. Look at example, the civil society of when us guys were still not born yet, of independence, clamor for multi-democracy. Those guys were intense. Those guys were proactive. Those guys continued to be on the streets. Reverend Joya were beaten all over. Guys were arrested. Just to even look at Wangari Maathai. If it wasn't for her, if she wasn't intense, if she wasn't continuous, we will not be having the Karuras, we will not be having, the Freedom Corner. That's the kind of thing when you talk about movement building. Of course, you have to ensure it's the right time. We do things at the right timing, and that timing is everything. Like right now, you cannot be talking to the government about any other thing. They are now focused about BBI. And if you want to push anything very urgent, it probably be related to BBI or something around that. Come next year, we're talking about elections. People not even talking about development. So what is the right timing for these things? Then creation of public interest. Of course, we have to arouse that interest in the public so that we build a mass of people around us to champion our cause. Then lastly, I put the potential work of a church-based. As you know, we all have this soft power. Anytime you hear there's disagreement in this country, whether it's IBC, whether it's election of the IBC commissioners, you'll always hear the church is part of the panel. Why? Every time there's things to do with coronavirus and everything, you hear there's an interfaith council that has been formed. But you never hear the government just approaching any civil society out there or other NGO out there to be at the table. Look at all reconciliation processes and peace processes in this country, or even in the region. The church is at the forefront. And we are saying we need to leverage on that power that the church has to create that movement. So what are some of the examples of climate justice movements we have? And I'm sure all of us have engaged, all of us are reading, all of us are knowing these things. Fridays for Future still remains one of those big climate justice movements, just started by one person, Greta Thunberg. They just said, you know what, I'm out here to just, call for climate justice. And she's done amazing. She was voted the Persons of the Year by New York Times, which is a really big deal. Even she was up against Trump. She actually beat Trump to the Person of the Year, someone like Trump, a president, just because of her consistency, just because of her passion and her passionate call. Remember her words, by playing with our future, we only have one planet. And this also led to strikes we had, the climate strikes we had in Kenya. I think you organized one in Kenya, a major one, which I participated in, and a couple of young people I see in the room here. But it ended there. There was nothing else that was continued. But in Europe, it became a big thing. I think it's just this COVID that has made things not be okay. and she's been invited in the right platforms. She addressed the UN General Assembly. You see, those are the spaces I'm talking about. She had access to the right people, right spaces. World Economic Forum, as I said, these are combination of big people, business people all over the world. She was able to address such forums, and it even became a survey. When a survey went out, you realize yesterday, 5 out of the top 10 risks that are likely to face the world are all climate and environmental related. That's the kind of movement or individuals we're talking about. Of course, Extinction Rebellion, some of these things might be new to you, depending with how you are in this space. But Extinction Rebellion is also similar to what Fridays for Future was doing. And this was a big movement in the UK. Guardian published it, and they had a petition. And you see all climate work that UK government is doing under Boris Johnson administration are all informed by these guys. And they're just young people, Oxford guys who came up, and they were calling for their institutions to divest from coal, to invest in renewable energy, and they were in the streets. And there was a video actually of even some police were joining them, which is usually not the case in many meetups. They will actually try to prevent you from accessing parliament and something like that. But it was a big movement towards climate justice. We have the Greenpeace. We all know the Greenpeace. I think they have been touted as one of the most progressive, world-known movement around. And they actually, one thing with Greenpeace, they don't receive funds from governments. So they receive funds from the likes of me, from the likes of you, from environmentalists, from kids' collections, and they do the advocacy because they believe the world needs to be a better place. Then and Greenpeace is it's not a faith-related movement. The three of them are not. Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, and Greenpeace are not faith-related. But for faith-related specific, we have Faith for Earth Initiative. This is under UNEP. It's new, not very new, because it's now been existing for the last 3 years. But this is a UNEP-supported program. So under UNEP, and I'm sure most of you have met Dr. Iyad, they have specifically decided to engage the faith communities. And they've been having a series of capacity building workshops. They've been having, anytime, I think last year, UNEA, we had a faith tent, and it was going to be the same thing in Chile during the COP25, but that never happened. They moved to Spain, but Spain couldn't be able to facilitate that. But the growing recognition of the role of faith-based, and this is just an initiative that was just built around like-minded faith communities. That includes everyone, the Muslims, the Sikh, the Hindus, Anglicans, everyone participate here. And you see why it's anchored at UNEP is because to be able to influence processes at the UN level. And of course, UNEP and UN is member states. So it's easy to even get governments on board to push the agenda. Then you have the Green Faith Fellowship, which is different from the Greenpeace. So Green Faith Fellowship is just a building, it's just a movement of multi-faith as well. But what they do, they take guys who've been active on climate justice and train them. They take them through a fellowship. So they take them through a 1-year training and give them the skills. They showcase their stories and they get guys out. So it's more of like a training. So actually getting a scholarship and going for Green Faith school, and then you graduate and you become, an environmental champion going forward. Then as we wind up, Seasons of Creation, we all know this. While I was working at ACT, I was actually sitting in the steering committee, the Global Steering Committee. So this is actually a Catholic-led initiative, and it's usually an annual event. So it starts from 4th September to 4th October. It's a month thing. And there are prayers, there are guys doing primigage, there are guys who are planting trees. But of importance is how Season of Creation has been able to shape Pope's message. And Pope has been very vocal on climate change. I'm sure you all know of Laudato Si, which has a very good ideas about environment and how economy should be. All those processes before Laudato Si was developed or was adopted and crafted by Pope. It is Seasons of Creation that has been over time, that started way back during Assisi time, who's been considered a great figure in Catholic space in terms of environment, who started that. And you can see how that has led into what we call Seasons of Creation nowadays. Of course, we have 350.org. They were very active. I don't know what has happened to them, but they were more concerned about fossil fuel, renewable energy, pushing for renewable energy, divesting from coal, those kind of things. And here now also I remember one, the Lamu movement, that the coal. Remember, we had one, and it was a success story that led to, you know, even the permit being struck and the coal hasn't taken place. Those are some of the movements. Of course, I just put the yellow vest there. This is France. So these are just a group of citizens in France who came up together, and they were protesting against fuel prices in France. And actually, because they were protesting every day, every time, it was in the news all over, the government had to change. They actually had to cut the levy they had to put on fuel. So colleagues, that's what I had under movement building. I don't know if it's a time for asking questions, but as we go along, I believe we already know that we are not alone. There are other guys doing other things. And I'd like to just stop here to be guided if you're going to get any other further questions, or 2 or 3 minutes for me to switch to climate finance. Thank you. Back to you, Susan and Lillian.
Okay, thanks everyone, and thanks Arnold for such a wonderful presentation. I think at this point in time is a moment for us really to pause and reflect on what Arnold has shared with us. I think most importantly, of course, he has taken us through the prerequisite in terms of kind of how do we prepare really to effect advocacy and influence policy processes or decisions for that matter. And of course, then he has gone further to really give some of the examples of climate justice movements that are in space. And of course, as he has pointed out, it cannot be exhaustive enough. He only just gave some of the top line examples, but there could be so many other movements. So I think to each and everyone who is participating in this session right now, it is a good moment for us now to have an interaction. If you have a question or a comment, we can start receiving that. And I would prefer that we do it through the chat, but you can as well go ahead and raise your hand so that you are allowed to ask the question directly. So it is time for question and answers and comments from the participants.
Okay, I can see a question here by Catherine. I would like to ask a question to Arnold. Which one of the existent climate justice movements do you think we should work with or contribute to?
Yeah, maybe Arnold, as you prepare to answer that question.
Yes, I'm taking the questions.
Yes, my other comment would be as ACT Alliance, don't we consider ourselves as a climate justice movement in our own right?
So I'll take those two. Thank you. Yes, just starting with you, Nicholas. Actually, ACT as it is, as an entity, we are not focused, we are not 100% focused on climate change. We get to do many programs so that we wouldn't be rightly considered per se a purely climate justice movement. Of course, if you look at entities that are mentioned, they are purely just climate, environmental kind of outfits. And that's the kind of thing they do. So even if they are, you know, referring to some other aspects of development here and there, their main, like almost 100% of their work is climate. But you are right to say ACT Alliance, ACT Kenya Forum here, through the organization and through what we call Act Now for Climate Justice campaign that we've been having, we rightly are classified, or we fall under that particular movement building or movement on climate justice. if you remember before, in the build up to Paris Agreement COP21, we had the We Have Faith campaign. That was a purely climate movement meant to, reach out, get petitions and get guys sign up and plant trees to push for an ambitious Paris Agreement, which happened. And then after that, it ended. But others are still continuing. If you look at the Greenpeace, there are guys who are just continuing to, do those kind of things. So you're right, under Act Now for Climate Justice, and I'll request colleagues to, the information is available on ACT website. We even have a hashtag, just Act Climate Justice. You can go look in, and Nicholas has been part of this process also, and many other colleagues here. So in that particular context, Nicholas, yes, you are right. And on the first question asked, yes, as a faith entity, or as Christians, as Lillian had mentioned yesterday, it would be good for us now to associate with our faith, or faith-inspired kind of climate justice, so that we don't lose our identity as faith, because our work is actually faith-inspired. Our values, our beliefs are sort of, find reference in the Bible and in social justice principles. So for me, to answer that question, I will advise as much as possible for ACT Kenya Forum and members in here to directly engage or link up with faith-inspired movements, but also to see good value and ideas and what others are championing in other spaces. For example, there's this movement, Divest Call, and Greenfield. I think they're doing that, Greenpeace as well in South Africa, and South Sea. As much as they are South Sea, I'm sure you've heard about it. I can write it for you guys. They are South African-based entity, but they are also doing coal, those kind of things. But they also work with other civil society organizations like the Oxfams. They work with CARE and any other like-minded civil society organizations that are pushing something that we believe in. So for me, for relevance, for impact, it would be both to be in both, so that you are all seen to be championing the same climate justice work that you're talking about. So don't choose selectively. You have to choose based on your values. If and the movement is their method of doing things is not aligned to your values, then you will sort of step back. But if they are aligning with your values and your aspirations and your calls for, a just a climate justice-free world, then join them. That would be my answer. But let's try to, as much as possible, as faith entity, lean towards those ones that are similar to us for obvious reasons, for comfort, for when you go for this, your prayer, your reflections, your faith leader speaking to the forum, and you have the same kind of language. You're almost at home or you're at family. That would be my take. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Arnold, for that response. More questions coming, of course, on the chat. Sharon Kibor says, very interesting presentation. What would be our Kenyan entry point? And Reverend Misoi is also talking about such a comprehensive presentation. This can be a wake-up call to all of us. Then Lillian is asking here, I did not quite get what Extinction Rebellion do. Could you kindly expound? Then there is another one from Charles and Katin and others. Thanks, Arnold, for very enriching presentation. The idea of climate movement is long overdue. We should push our government to declare the NDCs, and we can have a way to monitor the attainment. I think that's more on a comment. Can you please respond to the two questions? From Sharon and from this one from also Lillian about expounding on the rebellion, Extinction Rebellion.
Okay, thanks. So if I'll start with Extinction Rebellion, if I'll start with that first, if I'll start with Extinction Rebellion, So as I mentioned, it's actually abbreviated as XR. So XR is just a global movement, a global environmental movement that started in the UK. And it started actually in 2018, last year. So it's actually an advocacy group. And it was made up of, academics or institutions or students who were actually calling, and it was a London, I'm saying it's a UK based, who are actually calling for the institutions to take active action around climate change. And I told you one of the things they were referring to was they actually were able, if you get time, I can be able to share for you some of the videos that I had in my previous emails. They were calling on their government and even institutions, because they're made up of young people from universities, Oxford and the likes, and to basically divest from coal in clean energy. They were calling for UK government to they're putting more pressure on UK government to invest more in climate smart investments, to stop funding fossil fuels, and to protect the ecosystem or biodiversity loss. So it's just a grassroots movement. This was just a group of young people, I guess, inspired by what they were seeing in the world. And they got this Extinction Rebellion name, if I remember very well, from sciences and researches that were showing the human being is going to be extinct. This is after 1.5 report that I mentioned yesterday. So they were like, oh guys, we clearly, if we don't do anything, are we all going to die like that? Then Extinction Rebellion just came up. And they were just being guided, because when that report came about, it was like the humanity is facing what we called the sixth mass extinction. So they just coined a name around that, and they brought in, students, they brought in civil society organizations, and they were marching to parliament and those kind of things. So, and of course they were non-violent, and that's what they were doing. So that would be my answer around that. So it's just a movement that shouldn't worry you that much. Then number two, what Sharon asked. Yes, Sharon, as you say, yes, we, of course, by virtue of ACT for a member, being a member of ACT Alliance and our members being members of ACT Alliance, they have a right to participate and engage in, for example, ACT Now for Climate Justice campaign. When you look at, for example, Faith for Earth initiative, like, for example, we could get all ACT members, whether it's NCCK, whether it's ADS, whether it's Lutheran World Federation, to register and participate in the Faith for Earth initiative at UNEA. So that's the entry point. So we take advantage of the fact that UNEP is hosted here, and we have credible members who are doing good work, and they would like to engage in the agenda of that particular organization. And therefore, what they need to do is to just, for example, we could say one of the key outcomes is let's have all ACT members register for example, for UNEA 5. Of course, it's been postponed to 2022, I guess. But through that particular platform, they're able to engage and know what's going on. So the entry point for Kenya is there, and I don't see any challenge. We just need to take those proactive steps to engage with this. That would be my take on that. Thanks.
Okay, another quick one. Arnold is a question from Alan Getich, but more or less to what you respond. But Alan is asking, which movement should we all join so that our voice is heard? And then I see somebody, Kapkia, is asking, thanks Arnold for the presentation. 350.org is not clear to me. If you can give a response to
yes.
those two.
So for me, as I also mentioned, I alluded to that as much as we are concerned about overall, stabilizing of our greenhouse gases and, achieving a resilient, greener world, habitable world for all of us. As members of ACT, as Christians, as his own first says yesterday, then it would make sense if we could join those ones that are related to us. But as I've said, depending with what the movement is championing, you could be able to join, even if it's not necessarily a faith entity. And for example, I gave an example of Faith for Earth Initiative, which has a lot of work going on in at UNEP level. Those could be one of them. So for example, an entity like Anglican Development Services could register to be formally accredited or to be a member of, if they are not already, member of Faith for Earth Initiative. Of course, Seasons of Creation is also very open. It's as much as it's Catholic-led, but it brings a lot of many other, it's a multi-faith sort of platform just pushing for, care for creation, if you put it like that. So any of those movements, you could actually get your voice heard, if I'm understanding your question. It just depends with how you engage with them, how you bring your ideas to them, how you consistently participate in them. Because one thing with movements, if you're not at the table when they're doing things, you're almost left out. Then on 350.org, 350.org is also a movement, and one thing I didn't mention here is most of these movements usually start as movements, then they lead up to an organization. So they get a structure. Usually they will just be around people gathering and pushing for changes, but later on guys are feeling, why can't we, will be much better if we go into a structure, organization kind of setup. So 350 evolved, and for them, their focus has been on fossil fuels. Last I understand, and last I had discussions with them, they're just calling for a 100% renewable world. So they do not want to, see coal, oil, things happening like that. And they rally around people. There was so much in South Africa because of the nuclear and the coal things there. So for them, they just want the world to shift to renewable energy, sorry. And I think this is also aligned to what Christian Aid was doing. Remember the Stop, was it the energy campaign you guys were doing some time back, Nicholas? So that's how, the shift.
The big shift campaign.
Exactly, that's those kind of things. So they have been out there and they're getting the resources to just call and advocate for renewables and people to abandon coal, saying there's nothing like clean coal and the world just needs to embrace clean energy and renewables. So that's about the 350. And I will urge you to just look at them online, and you can be able to see very good works that they've been doing around this. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Arnold. Maybe before you answer the next question, the other thing that I would really point out, this is just but a comment to the group based on the presentation that you have made, is that of course, as ACT Alliance, we have acted before and we continue acting as a movement of a faith-based organization for climate justice. The thing is, what gives us a distinct identity is basically our kind of push from a moral imperative point of view, backed by the teachings as they are contained in the Bible. I think that is the most distinctive approach that we have. What would be critical is that as ACT Alliance Kenya Forum, is that we are allowed to align with other movements for collective action and enhanced voice, as long as our values are aligned, as long as what the other movements are calling for is basically pushing our moral imperative for climate justice. I think that would really be the bottom line. Therefore, there is no kind of like a limitation to who we can align with respect to the movements that are in space, as long as our values are aligned and that they are push for climate justice from a moral perspective. Then the other thing I would really point out is that I've seen really a lot being raised about the 350.org. I think we can also be open because some of these entities, some of us are members. For example, I subscribe to 350.org, and from time to time, they keep on updating me on what is happening, or what is expected of us, or what is the campaign issue at hand. and stuff like that. I think, and it is very enriching even to be part of these movements in terms of learning to expand our knowledge scope so that we are effectively updated on what is happening, and also in terms of gaining more skills and understanding of the advocacy issues that are on the table. Now, quickly now going back to Arnold, is like questions still keep on coming. So there's a question here from Reverend Daniel Sawe. What method did Rwanda use in the issue of climate change as they are ahead in Africa? That's a question from Reverend Daniel Sawe. Then there is Stephen Lewis. Arnold, should a movement be rooted into a larger creation care movement rather than just climate change? Since I have experienced it easily becomes political, and the churches can be polarized by politics but not by faith and our creation and our creation care mandate. So those two.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. If I start with the one from Lutz, Stefani. Yeah, you're right. As long as that movement is a faith-based or faith-inspired movement, then it can be rooted in the larger creation care movement. But when you're talking about issues like, fossil fuel, renewable energy, other climate change issues like interrogating or, science policy, practice interface, then usually you cannot just be rooted in the larger creation care movement. But if you're a faith entity, and that's what Nicholas has said, and I like how he's summarized it, that our values, which we faith entities have been known for or ascribed to, should be the guiding principles, the values and all that. So if you have to create a movement, a faith-inspired movement, then it should be rooted 100% in the larger creation story, the Genesis story, the stewardship role that we are given by God, and or even avoiding of exploitation of resources and using these resources sustainably. Then that should be the main. Then that should be anchored. But why it gets political is because churches have stopped being just modest, and churches are actually going out there and calling on governments to do things even in the ways that are not churchish, if I put it like that in quote. The church has been seen to be, not going to the streets, not encountering tear gas and those kind of things. But we've seen in other churches in the West, actually, they have actually gotten in problems with police during their protest. But it's because the church has chose those orthodox means, and rather than just be on the pulpit, because they see no action is happening. And I think for me, if you have to ask me, I'll tell you, yes, I think it's time we rise, we rose up. We are just a sleeping giant, and we need to be out there with the people and with other organizations who are doing other things. So, and we need to speak to power, basically, and we should be honest about it. So if it's a church and you are feeling comfortable in your own space, in your own values, in your own creation story, then root that into that. But the world has gone beyond that now. We are seeing things that are facing the creation that we are protecting, and we need to speak out in very unorthodox means, because we have to achieve that change regardless of how we do it. Then on Rwanda case, my brother, yes, Rwanda case is very interesting. I don't think we'll want to go into that discussion now, but Rwanda has just been on our level in so many ways. They seem to be getting a lot of support. Their government is serious. When you hear the speeches from the environment ministry and the kind of things they are doing, you'll be surprised. So their story is different. They are just a focused country. They just have the right leadership. They have the right support from the donors. And I don't think there's anything they wouldn't do. So their story is one of those case studies that probably I could share on the side and just get to see how even their structure looks like, how their environment work looks like. You'll be amazed. That I'd rather leave it cause of time and share with you bilaterally and through Susan, so that you're able to know, even you look at the climate change policy law, you'll be surprised the kind of things you see. But more importantly, is the work that they do as a ministry or as a government on climate change that has got the buy-in from the people. Like, for example, cleanup, monthly cleanup streets. those are efforts that has actually been made mandatory. Could we do such a thing like that in Kenya? I doubt. But I guess that's a story that we sort of all know, but I can be able to share more details about specifically policy content issues of how they are managing their climate change work. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Arnold. I think the question will still keep on coming. If you have got questions, for the interest of time, we are supposed to move to the next session. If you still have questions, feel free just to post them. I think they will be collated so that we can get back a response on the same in terms of taking this conversation forward. Otherwise, I think we thank Arnold very much for the good presentation and able response to the comments and the questions that were raised by the participants. Thanks. Back to Susan.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for that session. We truly appreciate you. And thank you, everyone, for engaging. Thank you for raising questions. We have taken note of them, and we will be able to answer before we end up today's session. So, Arnold, you can now take over to climate financing. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, it's me again. I hope you don't get bored. I don't like boring people. I like having very exciting discussions. So as we covered up that movement building, and I guess that's, from the questions I can guess, we're already getting the gist of why we need to come together and push for a cause, basically. So my main session that I prepared today was on climate finance. And as I said, please don't get bored with content. We have no choice. We have no choice. We have to know the content. We have to interact with the content. And we have to, break down the content. And I'm happy that we are all here at this platform, but you also work at the field level and community level, which is very exciting. So I'd like to share on climate finance. As you all know, climate finance, and allow me to share my screen again. And please tell me if you can be able to see from your end.
Yeah, it is visible. It is visible, okay. Yes.
Yeah, so climate finance is one of those hotly contested topic in climate negotiations. It's the same thing here. When you hear governors protesting and making statements on county shutdown, if money is not going to come, if revenue division bill is not signed into law, when you hear, guys asking, how much are you investing in BBI? When you hear corruption, we have a debt as a country. When you hear we are borrowing, it's all finance related. It's all issues around meeting the needs versus the resources. So climate finance is one of those most hotly contested issue in climate conversations. And I'd like to just, again, just as I did yesterday, I understand we are not all at the same level in terms of engaging with these things at that level, but I'll just try to point out, at least get bare minimums out of this on issues of climate finance going forward, because it's actually an important part, and especially for us as developing countries, because we don't have our own enough budgets to do just climate change as other developed countries. So we'll always definitely be talking about how we need more money, how we need more support to do our work. So this is the outline of this presentation. Again, I will urge that if something is not clear to you, you can be able to, have the slides later on and just go through them slowly by slowly. And if there are any other questions that you'd like me to, assist or clarify, either through question and answer or bilaterally outside this meeting, I'll be glad to do that. So I'm going to look at the context of finance very briefly. I'm not going to I've tried as much as possible to cut this content into very small pieces so that it makes the discussions lively. But then I'm going to also focus on the climate finance and the UNFCCC. If you remember yesterday, we said UNFCCC is the main custodian of the Paris Agreement. So you'll always see it happening. And if you have to talk about any climate finance issues or anything in climate change, then we must understand how they are reflected or they are covered under that particular framework. Then I'm going to look at, for example, climate funds and UNFCCC. So I'm just going to focus on 2-3 key major funds that we have, which I know most of you have heard about them. Then what is the current state of affairs in climate finance? Where are we as the world? Where are we in terms of financing? Then very interesting, which I'd like to bring to all of you, is ACT Alliance. In 2018, we developed an ACT resource guide to climate finance. This is how climate finance is so serious that we had to set aside money and engage and developed a whole guide. So it's a guide that has the sources of funds, how to access them, how ACT members can engage with these processes. And I will ask that if Susan could take note of it, or Nicholas, to be able to ask Elizabeth to pull this out from ACT Alliance pages or whatever. I don't have access. If I had my email, I'll definitely just share with you. But this is a resource that needs to be shared as part of this workshop. Then we are going to look at advocacy opportunities for ACT Kenya Forum. So the climate finance. One thing I'll tell you from my little experience on these processes is there has never been any defined definition of climate finance in the negotiations. What the convention talks about is it is finance provided by developed countries. I mentioned yesterday, developed countries are usually under Annex 1 to developing countries in Annex 2. These are countries in Annex 2. So it's basically the rich countries. That's how it's defined, loosely defined, and that's why I think it's been very contentious. It's just money that comes from developed countries to developing countries to be able to meet climate change goals, whether it's mitigation and adaptation. Then climate finance, so it's just money provided. That's how the definition is, by developing countries to developing countries. Then we're also getting into details. There'll be a bit of figures here because this is finance anyway. So UNEP, for example, estimates developing countries, and Kenya, I don't know if we're still developing or we are above that, middle income, something, but we sort of fall into a category, has estimated, and this is their research they did last year, that developing countries will need US 300 billion for adaptation. Remember yesterday we said, or Renten mentioned about our needs as Africa or as Kenya are not more of mitigation because they're not emitting that much, but our needs are adaptation. So if something comes up and tells you, a report comes up and tells you that the world needs this amount for adaptation, we are fairly square because they're also competing for that particular pot. But in 2016, out of the 300 billion, only 10.4 were raised for adaptation. That means we will not be able, just from that particular statement or that research, will not be able to meet adaptation goals or mitigate our impacts against climate change. But we all know, obviously, that it's the poorest, it's the most marginalized people who have no little say on these processes that are impacted the most. But resources are not there. So this is just also an addition. This is that developed countries shall provide under the UNFCCC. It's developed countries shall provide. I guess now we are getting this whole familiar with the word shall or may. It also came up in this BBI things and a lot of things. Shall and may. So it's actually mandates or requires, or it's a must that developed countries must provide that new and additional financing to developing countries. And it stresses that the needs of these countries, least developed countries, must be taken into effect when you are giving these funds. So what are these climate funds under the UNFCCC? What is this basket that we have? What is this accounts that we have for climate change? So one of the biggest climate funds we have is the Green Climate Fund, famously abbreviated as GCF. So as it stands right now, it's the largest climate fund we have. And so far, according to their latest information, actually, this is info that I'm sharing as of June this year, 2020. They have confirmed contributions to that particular kitty of 8.2 billion. Of course, and then there's a pledge of 9.8 billion in the first replenishment. So that's how huge this fund is. And this is actually one of the funds that is supposed to support countries to implement Paris Agreement. So as you can already see, the contributions are less as opposed to the pledges. And chances are very high by the end of 2020, probably these pledges will not come in. And that will mean there will be no funding for activities. And for it, the Green GCF just aims to, finance country-driven projects and create that shift in both adaptation and mitigation, and to have a balance of both as per their documents. These are guiding documents. So, so GCF reserves half of its adaptation resources for least developed countries and African states. So half of their adaptation funds they get, for example, it is reserved for African countries, and we are part of that. So you can get why that is obvious. But as of March 2020, the projects that have been approved globally, and this is global data or info, it is 129 projects that have been approved with a total commitment of 5.6 billion. Kenya, I think, is KCB. If you all have been following climate conversations in the country, KCB just got accredited to the GCF. So I'm assuming that the one of their projects or others is part of this 129 projects, and they are setting up structures to see how they're going to disperse that funds into the country. So how the fund is administered is through accredited entities. So for Kenya, the Treasury is the nationally designated authority or entity to manage these funds. Of course, it's obvious any country that where the Treasury, where the money is the guys will be doing it. So there are currently 97 accredited entities globally, but they are split. It's important to know they are split between international access entities and national. International, these are just submissions that don't need to be nominated by developing countries. So these are usually the UN agencies, the multilateral development banks, international finance institutions like IFC, African Development Bank. And these are the guys who channel most of the funds for GCF. Then, of course, we have the national direct access entities, which must be nominated by developing country national designated entities. For example, in this case, KCB was nominated or was endorsed by Treasury. And Treasury happens to be the national designated authority. But also here, Treasury can also, if, for example, a county, and we were talking about, I'm trying to put this in the discussions we had yesterday, if a county is able to come up with a good project, a really good, convincing project, both balancing mitigation, adaptation, and including gender in it, then it can actually take it to, it can actually submit that project for GCF funding, but the Treasury, who is the NDA needs to, give them that letter of accreditation. So these national entities apparently are the ones that are dispersing very little percentage of GCF funds, only 14%. Then, so to help countries access that fund, the GCF or the fund provides for readiness and preparatory support. So they will give Kenya, for example, I'm sure Kenya was given this money of 1 million to just prepare, to put the institutions, to put their policies in place, their plans in place, and all that. Then of this direct support of these funds is to enable them to prepare for accessing the full GCF resources. So the overall amount a country can request is 300,000 a year to be able to, US, to be able to undertake their activities. So, but countries can still apply up to 3 million on top of that to formulate their NAPs, adaptation plans, and for the adaptation planning. And this may include also at county level. So if counties are, if Kisumu, Kakamega, or Busia, or any other county, West Pokot, are able to put up a good program, a very convincing one, which I'll tell you later on how hard to access GCF is, then that can be, taken through Treasury and then it can be submitted. So in readiness program, up to this year, they have approved almost 363 projects in 136 countries with that particular total funding. So there are already other projects that are already in progress, and probably we don't know yet. Treasury will give us the data of who's applying. I know in Kenya, apart from KCB recently, IUCN got some funding with, I think, Nature Conservancy to do something around, drought and land restoration management here. And I can pull those information on who has been able to get GCF fund in Kenya. So, under enhanced direct access, this is what I was talking about, and I put this here specifically to share that GCF can actually give funds to the counties and other multi-stakeholder agencies to be able to undertake projects. And have actually what they call a simplified approval process. So how they just, they are trying to, as much as possible, ensure that many entities, especially from developing countries, are able to access funds and proposal. So that process, from preparing to review to approval, it is something that is simplified. And so far, 13 projects to date have been supported through this SAP process as per their data. Then, so that's GCF. So GCF, in summary, is just one of the biggest funds we have there, and countries can access. There's a whole process. And in Kenya, as I've mentioned, just trying to put this in Kenyan context, is the National Treasury. That is the one that has been designated to, support interviewing in, accrediting members who want to support. And I've mentioned an example of KCB and ICUN and NDMA, who are going to work through Ministry of Environment and I think Agriculture, have been a beneficiary of this. Then Adaptation Fund. It's also one of the biggest fund that we have under the UNCCC. And Adaptation Fund, of course, became operational in 2009. And this is, as you can see, it's just meant to fund adaptation projects. And how it was conceived then, it was that it was under this was actually served under Kyoto Protocol. This is the protocol that was there before Paris Agreement, but it's going to continue to serve the Paris Agreement going forward. And the mechanism was under Clean Development Mechanism, where countries are supposed to sell carbon, and then you get paid for your carbon, and then you use that money to invest in adaptation projects. But of course, CDM was not a very good process. There were issues of carbon pricing. African countries did not have the technology, the mechanisms, and the capacity to do that. And at some point, the markets are well developed in developed countries as opposed to Africa or other countries. So it's going to continue serving the Paris Agreement to basically just provide for adaptation only processes. So so adaptation, the resources that have been capped at 10 million. So a country can only access 10 million US to do the adaptation process. But also countries can submit proposals up to additional 4 million, so 14 million for regional or multi-country projects. So for example, if we are to do an East Africa adaptation program, then you can be able to access 14 million, but per country is just 10 million ceiling. So far up to date, the Adaptation Fund has received 978 million US in terms of contributions and commitment of 716 across 102 adaptation projects so far. Like GCF, again, the funds are channeled through national, regional, and multilateral implementing agencies. Of course, there's a board. Same to GCF, there's a board that approves these projects that come through. So to help enhance ownership, the fund is accessible now through national implementing entities who are called the NIIs. In Kenya, here it's NEMA. NEMA is the one that is, the national implementing entity, and NEMA has actually been able to get money to Adaptation Fund to be able to undertake activities. So you can see already Treasury is getting GCF and be able to manage that process. But here NEMA under the Ministry of Environment are able to access Adaptation Fund. So as of now, as I've said, of course, there are some funds that go through entities like NEMA, but there's also some funds that go through international organizations, especially the UN agencies, UNDP and the likes, to be able to manage these projects. So currently, the fund provides money to 12 multilateral organizations, 32 national, and national here, 32 is, for example, NEMA is part of the 32 national entities, and 6 regional implementing entities overall as of 2020. Of course, the processes are all been streamlined. The accreditation process, just like GCF, you have to prove that you are able to handle this money. You have to ensure that your reporting processes are thorough and that you're able to administer these funds. And of course, there's a readiness support, which is given to countries up to 30,000, be able to support them to prepare. And actually, this money Kenyan government gets. So for us, the question would be, as ArchMe Kenya Forums, as guys who are doing climate justice work, are we aware that these funds exist, and are we engaging with the implementation of these projects? and these funds? That will be the biggest question going forward. So, so the funds just basically gives that readiness grant to support countries prepare and do their things and learn from each other. But of interest is last year at the COP25, I thought this is important for us to know. They introduced something they're calling innovation grants, and this is not, and this is where we can come in because I think the aim of this session is to look at how we can also tap into these resources. An innovation grant is available up to 2 million and it's more of grants to national implementing entities. So they introduced this 10 million pilot innovation program to support around 45 grants, and it's going to be administered, of course, through the UN system, UNDP and UNEP. But this innovation fund is available to non-accredited entities. What I mean is NGOs like us can access, like Christian Aid, Lutheran World Relief, World Renew. If they have a very nice, exciting innovation program, they can actually directly apply and get that money to do their work. Then under it again, there is something they call learning grants, and learning grants is up to 150. It's available to now NEMA only, and here it's just to issues of learning, as you all know, learning, transfer of knowledge, and those kind of things between either the implementing entities, NEMAs themselves, or within the larger adaptation fund family, how that's going to work. So that's it about the adaptation fund. Second last fund is the Least Developed Countries Fund. This, of course, was developed just specifically for the least developing countries under UNFCCC, and it just support them, to deal with impacts of climate change. And so far, it's provided like over 1.3 billion in grant financing to over 280 projects. So, which still remains the largest portfolio of adaptation projects in LDC. So the least development finance goes through Green Environmental Facility, GEF, I'm sure you've heard about it, accredited entities, which are usually multi-development banks like African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other UN agencies. And the LDCF just supports countries to implement the adaptation programs at country level and targets sectors like water, agriculture, food security, DRM, infrastructure, and provide ecosystems. Then the LDF also focuses on reducing vulnerabilities in key sectors and people support communities to do that. So, in 2018, the latest data we have is the GEF was provided support of 96.6 million to support capacity building initiatives for climate action in developing countries. And actually this came, I think for Kenya, they've been able to access this through UNDP because UNDP have been having this GEF, and UNEP also has been having GEF funds, and they're doing country programs here with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry to do this. So that's brief about the Least Development Climate Fund. Then we have last one, the SMALLS Grant Program, which is still under GEF, and I'm sure we've all interacted with this, still under UNDP. So this was developed way back. For those who've been, engaged in this process, this is a fund that was mooted in 1992 during the Rio process, and has provided to close to 20 billion in grants and mobilized $1 billion in co-financing most of the projects. So this is actually the longest serving financial mechanism under this process, not even the GCF, not even the Adaptation Fund. And it supports even UNEP work, like conventions, issues to do with waters and chemical, ozone, those processes that are usually under UNEP. And the good thing with this fund is also dedicated to local civil society actions that promote development and global. So it's funds that is actually available to us. If Christian Aid decides they want to engage on this process, in this fund, they could actually be able to get any NCCK, if they decide they want to, bid for this proposal, this fund, they can actually get this money and implement their projects, whether adaptation or mitigation. But as you realize, most of them are actually leaning towards adaptation. So this is just other, including information, which I'll let you guys read in terms of how far, so far by this year, how much has been spent and how much has been pledged for that small grant facility. So as we wind up, what's the current state of climate finance affairs? So I picked this, of course, yesterday I was showing you stuff for climate action, for climate tracker. So the guys who have been doing or tracking climate finance, at least credibly, that I've known, is a climate policy initiative. So they look around, they ask governments, they ask development institutions, finance, DFIs, and ask them, how much have you given? So if you look at this from 2013, 2018, which is not very far, you can see the billions that have been collected. Realize the highest amounts we collected were in 2017, where we crossed the, the mark to 612 billion globally. But of course, that started going down in 2018, and it's actually projected that the funds has been going down. I haven't seen the latest info, but I know the funding from the projections, from the interim reports, that funding is going down, and that will tell you where things are headed. I'm sure it's even worse now with COVID going forward. And who's contributing this money? You can see clearly most of the hugest guys, contributors for climate finance are actually private sector or private actors. Public, still a problem. So that will tell you, as guys who are in developing countries, who are relying on government to give us money or budgets, will have problems. So you can see between those years, between 2013 and 2018, you can see the highest contribution was by private sector in the year 2017, 2018, sorry. And that led to the total finance of 579 billion. So you can already tell. And if private sector are contributing the majority of the funds, that tells you they will not be investing in adaptation. They'll definitely be investing in mitigation, where they can do solar panels, where they can get money, basically. So that's a problem. This one should not confuse you. It just tells you what percentage is going to adaptation and what percentage is going to mitigation. And of course, put in mind the discussion we had yesterday, we are adapting more. So we actually need more resources to adapt. And if resources globally for adaptation are not there, chances are very high we might not be able to adapt very well. So this just gives you the sources and sources of this finance, whether it's from commercial institutions, whether it's from corporate actors. That's on my left. Then the instruments. The instruments is also very important. You can see majority of the monies that are coming in are not actually through grants, they're actually loans. So that means with our debt problems in Africa, we are still getting money for climate change, but it's in form of a loan. So we still have to repay against our other needs that we have as a country or as countries. And how much is spent on adaptation? Realize mitigation, it's crazy. Mitigation has been able to attract. So all this gray area you see here, or gray or something, mitigation has been able to raise 537 million US dollars, as opposed to to adaptation. So this just tells you how things are not working very well. And as I've told you, private sector is more enticed towards renewable energy, setting up solar panels, and that costs money, and that's what attracts them. They will not be doing resilience adaptation in Turkana or West Pokot, for example. Then the latest report from OECD, Organization for Economic Development, they have been doing credible reports as well. And they have so far given us what they had. And this is just 3 key highlights. I didn't want to go into details of that. So in 2018, loans represented, as I said, 74% of all public finance cash. Only 20% was grants. So, and if funds are able to be mobilized through loan and is given to us either through GCF or given through adaptation fund or small grant, it means we will still pay back that money. And I think that's a problem also. Then bullet 2 talks about what went to mitigation versus adaptation. Remember, the goals globally are to balance between adaptation and mitigation funds. But as of 2018, in 2018, as per that report, and also Oxfam was a part of this process and they have been key on disseminating this, only 21% went to adaptation, 70 mitigation. And as I've explained, and we'll have this discussion going forward. Then in 2016, 2018, Only 14% of climate finance went to least developing countries and 2% to small developing countries. The proportion of the funding was in form of loans. So that's just repetition. So even the money that is being collected globally for climate finance, majority of that money is not going to developed countries like us or small island level countries that are almost on the verge of extinction. That money is still going to, for example, realize most of the green fund money would go to a country like Turkey to do their renewable energy, and you can see Turkey is also a well good doing country. Money still goes to China to do some work, but not coming to Africa. So this is the resource that I say which should be shared. We developed this while I was still at ACT. So it covers 60 funds. It's more detailed than what we have, but of course it's heavy on content. So it talks about multilateral climate finance, bilateral climate finance, NGO finance, regional and national climate funds. Then it briefly talks about the background, eligibility, thematic areas, conditions of funding, contact details, and assessment. I will 100% urge all of you to get this resource and read. It will give you more in-depth detailed information about climate finance and all that. And we even did a pilot in Bangladesh with the Christian Commission on Development. And they were able to, there's a case study of how they were able to, access some funding, yet they were just a Christian commission in So as we wind up, what are the advocacy opportunities for ACT? For me is in whatever calls, in whatever forums you are in, we need to push for predictability, we need to push for transparency, and we need to push for new and additionality. Should be stressed in all cases. So we need funds to be predictable. We need these funds to be transparent. And the biggest issue has been when UK government or EU gives us money and they say this money is for climate resilience projects. Do we ever get to know that that's their contribution to the ODA or that money is specific for climate change? The money that is coming in terms of development funds or bilateral or multilateral development funds sometimes are not necessarily climate related. They come in as a way of ODA. Let me not confuse things, but they come in as the way developed countries are obliged to give out to developing countries. Then financial support is needed, and we need to call for more increased funding generally, but we need to strike and call for more increased adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage fund. But more importantly, we need to have a balance between what comes in, whether it's from private sector or from governments. It should be balanced between mitigation and adaptation efforts. The adaptation financing should be, and by large, should be grant-based. Of course, we know the difference between grant. If something is grant, you don't have much hassle. There are no interest tied, and you don't have. It's not a loan. A loan you have to repay, and the interest rate might go up. You have to pay, and us guys borrow our loans commercially on commercial interest. So when government goes to borrow money in the States, they borrow using US states at that particular rate. They don't get it in Kenyan shillings. That will tell you the rates and how we are getting messed up going forward. So poor and climate vulnerable countries with low capacity must get preferential access to climate finance. As I said, majority of the funds actually still goes to Turkey, goes to Thailand, goes to very well developed countries, by the way, but not in Kenya or in Somalia, for example. Then there's need for us to engage with national entities accessing this global finance. We just have to, and I think that should be one of the outcomes of this training. That all these finances that we know Kenya is accessing, please let's see how we can directly get engaged with them going forward. I will end here. Thank you. I know it's been heavy on content, but I just had to deliver this. Sorry, guys, but yeah, I look forward to it, and back to you, Susan and the team.
Okay. Thanks, Arnold, for the comprehensive presentation. In fact, already the presentation has listed a lot of questions going by the charts so far, but maybe we can give you a minute so that you can take a glass of water before you bounce back to respond to some of the questions, which are already so many in the chat as you can see. maybe in that interlude, so that you get a cup of water, I would say that actually climate finance is a critical issue, and when you read the Paris Agreement, actually it is designated as an enabler, and there is a specific article discussing about it. And even when you read other articles which touch on mitigation, touch on adaptation and other things, you find that actually climate finance still runs through like what I can refer to as a common code. So that one actually demonstrates its importance when it comes to responding or taking action on climate change. And of course, the aspect of definition of climate finance, definitely from the politics of the UNFCCC and the way it is intended to be from that aspect or moral perspective or climate justice, then it takes a very narrow sense, yeah, because it basically refers to public resources from developed to developing countries in light of the UNFCCC obligations to provide what is referred to as new and additional financial resources. So basically, that is the narrow kind of definition it takes, but it is because it is developed from that moral perspective of climate justice that actually the developing countries or non-Annex 1 countries, as they are referred, are suffering from the climate impact brought about by the action of Annex 1 countries, that is the polluters as they were. So there is that kind of moral obligation on Annex 1 countries or developed countries to provide climate financing as an enabler for the developing countries to respond to climate change. So in that sense, it takes that narrow definition, but from a moral perspective for justice, climate justice, that they are those who are responsible and they have the capability, and therefore they should support the countries that have got less or low capability to respond to climate change by channeling climate finance. And that is actually captured in the Paris Agreement. Now, otherwise, climate finance can have a wider sense, yeah, to refer to all financial flows relating to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So when you talk about all financial flows relating to climate change mitigation and adaptation, of course, in a way, Arnold has touched some of those, even from private sector as well, yeah. We can also talk, for example, we are in a developing country as Kenya, even funds from our own exchequer, yeah, or even funds from corporate bodies like Safaricom, as long as they are directed to support climate change actions, either adaptation or mitigation, yeah, or even funds by individuals, yeah, can be treated as climate finance. But actually the question normally comes in, how do we really capture and show that? So I think we can have that kind of thinking in terms of climate finance, that there is that narrow sense of climate finance as defined under the UNFCCC obligations and under the Paris Agreement, but which is pegged on the moral perspective of climate justice, but climate finance can have a wider sense where we are referring to all financial flows related to climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I think with those few comments, my brother Arnold should have now taken a glass of water and therefore ready to respond to some of the so many questions which have been raised in the chat. So Arnold, are you back?
Yes, Nicholas, I'm back, and thanks for the interlude. As you mentioned, yeah, and partly you've answered some of the questions that I've seen coming through. So let's see how we handle. But let's take this as, let's deliberate. I may not be, the expert, but I can guide. But let's open it up to discussions around it. So yes, I'm here to take the questions. So from the chat, I can see there's a question that has been asked, and please help me in case I miss one. Edna has asked, is it Edna? There's Charles, and there's also something around Edna, my team. So just ask, could you give examples of private sector that give climate financing? Yes, as Nicholas has mentioned, in broader definition of climate finance, it could be any money that is coming from any sector or any person or community to do climate change. But in terms of UNFCCC constrictions, it's just money flowing from developed to developing countries. I'll give an example of Kenya. I don't know if you are all aware of the Turkana, Lake Turkana wind power. That was a project. It's actually a renewable project, but who financed it? For example, of course, there was government there, but it was actually financed by a private. When we hear about private sector, it's just in Kenya we know them as private developer. Well, I don't know what will fit, but it's actually a renewable project. It's one of those projects that government is priding itself in terms of renewable energy, bringing more power to the grid and all that. But it was purely financed by private money. It's not just government had its own stake. That's how. Look at example and let's give example. Look at example of how we generate our power in this country. KenGen doesn't solely rely on money from the exchequer, but there are actually private entities that come in, financial institutions that come in, for example, which are private in nature, that give in money. Look at example, the work Manu Chandaria Foundation has been doing on arboretum, on forest conservations, on communities. Look at what for example, we did for KCB, the Safaricom, Kenyans for Kenya initiative through Red Cross, and the many climate projects that were then done by Red Cross during Abbas era. All those, and it's money that the private sector was coming, but Kenyans were also contributing to that particular kitty. If you look at this community-driven tree planting campaigns, look at, I frequent Arboretum a lot under Karura for my own exercise. And it's actually, you find the organizations like called Fauna, Friends of Nairobi Arboretum. These are just private guys who contribute money to be able to support conservation efforts. Look at the conservancy we have. Safaricom sponsoring Lewa Marathon for conservancy. Those kind of things. So there are these small initiatives that corporates in this country drive, like Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the solar lighting program, the LED lights. It's one way, but you see, what I'll tell you, and I like what Edna said here, is private sector is in business. Sure. Of course, we are saying we need to engage them on board, and we actually need to give them a business case for investing in climate change and adaptation. But as it is right now, for them, they're looking at, if I were to give you 10 million, as KCB, for example, gives you 10 million, what are you going to use that money? And how am I going to recoup back? Because, their money is also to shareholders. Their money is not to them. They are shareholders who require returns at the end of the year. So as much as they are doing this, but they're very selective. So we also need to entice them to get into adaptation and community resilience work, water, things like that, and all that. But as it is right now, how I see, just trying to answer that broad question on private financing, is that for them, it's a business case. They have to look at a proposal and see how it's going to work. Now, for KCB, we are lucky. They have just gotten accredited to be Nini for GCF. Now they'll be looking at projects. And the GCF requires that there's a balance for adaptation and mitigation. And chances are very high if you submit a credible adaptation project, of course with gender or whatever thing in there, chances are very high they are likely to give you money. Not because it's their own money, but it's because it's money that is coming from others. but they act as custodians of that money privately because of the accreditation process. So that's how I'll try to answer that question of private sector. But they are true in Kenya. There have been initiatives that have been done by private sector, the big corporates that have come together to support climate work.
Arnold, maybe I can weigh in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
In terms of sources and channels of financing of climate change, of course, we have agreed that broadly we can talk about public sources of finance and also private sources of finance. I think some of the public sources of finance, of course, which has been illustrated is, of course, the UNFCCC financial mechanism, including the GCF. Those monies normally come from the governments from Annex 1 who have made their contribution to that kitty, and even others who may make their contribution. Of course, you have got development financial institutions, which includes, of course, the multilateral development banks like the World Bank, AFP, and many others. And then we have other international climate finance initiatives, like, for example, when you deal with the UK aid, they have the ICF, that is International Climate Fund, yeah? So that is also public funds. Then, of course, if we can now look inward as well, because we've been looking outward so much, is about the national and subnational climate finance sources and initiatives. For example, in Kenya, we are talking about the National Climate Change Fund. And I think the last time I checked, they were saying that they have capitalized it with 500 million shillings. And when you look at the subnational, like the counties, Christian Aid and other consortia have been working, supporting the counties to establish what we call the county climate change fund mechanism. So those counties that have committed some of their development budgets to support climate change actions at that level, those are public funds. And of course, you can also look at other climate finance institutions which also draw funds from the public sources. Of course, without really repeating what Arnold has said about private sources, then of course the private sources are so many, including the commercial banks. Yeah, we know situations where commercial banks actually lend money to support climate change actions. That's a private source. Of course, it will come with paying of interest. Yeah, microfinance institutions or institutional investors. You've heard about institutional investors who are ready, for example, to support a certain initiative, which could be related to mitigation or adaptation, but mostly they like mitigation initiatives. Yeah, so those are all private sources of finance. So there are many ways you can look at them, including insurance, pension funds, private equity, venture capital funds, strategic and corporate investors, for example. I think we cannot overemphasize that. Of course, there are other aspects of other sources of finance, which are more or less in the category of private sources. Of course, are households, foundation and churches, social responsible investors. So like Safaricom, when they do that. Or foundations, a number of entities, for example, under the Act Kenya Forum, we could be beneficiaries of climate finance, which is coming from foundation. I know, for example, Christian Aid is a beneficiary of such a fund, and there's a project which is running on in northern Kenya with the support of foundation. And we have received this funding before, and we expect to receive similar funding into the future. Thank you.
There's a question here.
Yes.
There's a question because of time. Since the funding for adaptation looks, this is by Stefan Lutz, my good friend here. Since the funding for adaptation looks bleak for us, wondering if the church can advocate with GOK to use part of the budget to fund massive adaptation program in Kenya through all 47 counties. We can't rely on outside funding for our own survival and well-being. And I guess he's also been supported by a couple of colleagues online. I'll tell you, yes, for sure. Actually, government is doing that. I'm sure we're all aware of the NDMA, National Drought Management Authority. National Drought Management Authority is actually a government entity financed by the exchequer or by our taxes, basically. But they also get funding. And the huge program they have there is called the EDE, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. Ending drought emergencies. But of course, NDMA is in 23 ASAL counties, not 47. And that has been the biggest question going forward. But through that particular NDMA entity, we get drought resilience programs happening, and there are mainly adaptation, by the way. The drought resilience they do in, assaults, whether it's water, whether it's, animal prepare, contingency planning, and those kind of things. So yes, yes, it's true. Probably what needs to go up, the advocacy should be to scale that up. From my thinking, probably that needs to go up, because as of now, at least we have NDMA, and look at even what NGOs are doing. And I'm sure most of you have programs in ASAL counties, drought resilience, climate resilience program. All those are adaptation projects, by the way. EU funds them to do those, but you realize they fund those programs through government entities, and therefore it becomes like it's government doing that, and all that. But there's money that has been said. If you looked at the budget, this year's budget, there was quite a chunk of money that was set aside for drought resilience, mitigating against the effects of climate change, and it's our taxes mainly. It's our taxes mainly. So there's something happening. It's just that it's not happening at the scale we like to see. And our advocacy calls, I agree, should be on scaling those kind of initiatives going up. So that answers that. Then I saw something else. Thanks for the appreciations. I saw something apart from the limited knowledge about these funds in Kenya. What other reasons are there behind most of this funding going to Europe and Asian countries? Yes, that's a very good question. I'll tell you, yes. Actually, most of the countries receiving these funds are actually Asian countries and Europe. Why? Because there's something called bankable projects. So GCF has insisted, and for those who haven't gone through that process, that training, there's something called a bankable project. We actually, in Africa and in most developing countries, least developed countries and seeds, these are small island developing states, the capacity to develop bankable projects is just limited. So in Europe and in Asia, guys really are able to, bring out bankable projects. So it can even be it can be in Turkey, but the guys want green Turkey. And they come up with a very nice mitigation program in Turkey. And it will get funded by GCF because it looks bankable. Bankable, they mean it's supposed to, there's certain criteria, there are 6 criteria there for GCF funding. And probably we could have this discussion going forward again. But there's a certain criteria that we Africans or least developed countries are not able to achieve. So that explains why most of the funding still goes to Asia, and also because of their situations. Asia, they are disaster and climate prone. So probably guys their capacities have improved over time. An earthquake can happen in Japan right now, and it will just be in the news for 2-3 days. But if same thing was to happen in Africa, it will be there for years and it'll be fundraising. Because Asia has developed systems over time. They know their processes, they know their procedures, and it's easy for them to put out these proposals to get funding. And they can justify that and going forward. Also reporting, look at the reporting for these funds. You realize we don't even do that much reporting. Even myself, as someone who's in this field, sometimes they struggle to just ask government colleagues to share a report on where we were on this process, despite my connections with them. So that explains the challenge, basically. So we need to improve our capacities, and I think that has also been highlighted in many GCF reports. That's why they give you readiness funds to build your capacity so that you prepare to do a bankable proposal or project for them to fund. So that will explain that, by the way. Then Maureen also was just supporting, Maureen Magak was just supporting Lutz, saying the only problem is government behaves like it doesn't understand the seriousness of climate change impact. Also, the officers in charge in the national and counties have little knowledge on these issues. We need the right people in this department to help push for the funds allocation. Yes, you're right. You're very right. As even Nicholas hinted yesterday, you realize guys who are manning these directorates or these departments or even some of CECs who are supposed to make decisions on climate change have least knowledge about these processes, and yet they are the ones who are custodians of these plans at the county level. Then I haven't seen any question coming through yet. Lillian also supports Stefan Lutz as well. Then it's my wish, Roslyn, it's my wish that Act Forum will find a way of tapping into climate financing space. It's a big elephant in the county, yes, for sure. And I think that's the purpose of this session so that we can start engaging on how do we resource our plans on climate change going forward. Then Kelly Roberts writes here, Kenya has a sophisticated climate finance policy setting underpinned by the Climate Change Act of 2016, the National Climate Change Finance 2018, then the National Climate Change Action Plan 2013. The progressive development of these policies and corresponding frameworks point towards a strong political will to support climate action. To enhance progress, though I feel we still have a long way to go because of the political aspect. Yes, you're right. The National Council on Climate Change has never sat as provided for in the Act of 2016. We have these policies in place. And the biggest question has been, who should be the custodian of, for example, the Climate Change Fund? Is it the Ministry of Environment through CCD, or should it be the Treasury? And I'll tell you, there have been tough wars, and probably Nicholas will explain to you this. The Act provides that the fund be administered by the Ministry of Environment. But Treasury, of course, they are the custodians of the PFM Act, and any act that has to be established, even the 500 million one that we know has been established, has to go through them. But why they are insisting on administering that fund is still not very clear. So there are also a bit of tug wars there. So in Treasury, being GCF, NDA, getting this funding, World Bank funding coming through them, UN funding coming through them, and Treasury is big. So there have been those issues. But politically, yes, you can see there's political will. You should see our president give speeches on world stage, whether it's at conservation leaders pledge on conserving the environment and trees, forest cover. But I guess there's a disconnect between the statements, the political statements that are made at very high level meetings, and what happens on the ground. But at least we are grateful something is happening in Kenya. We just need to strengthen that. I agree on Kelly, this is Sharon, our resource allocation is highly dependent on political will, but isn't this real for every country? A good example is US. Yeah, you're right. Then I don't think I see any other question, honestly. How can we have a practical approach to climate change advocacy? Can we form a consortium of CSOs in attendance to push for this agenda? That's David, that's true. And I guess that was the purpose of the movement building session that we had before. How we get ourselves into that space. I know in Kenya there exist two entities, CSO entities on climate change. There's the Kenya Climate Change Working Group and the PAC-JALED, Kenya Climate Platform on Governance, who are also all of them are in these spaces for government. So I guess it's us knowing which spaces to engage in. Do we want to choose as faith-based organizations only to engage in going forward, or do you want also to work with other existing networks? Then, yes, climate change is unfortunately a political agenda in the US and other countries, and not a survival, well-being, and ensuring most vulnerable are being supported. I think that's okay. I don't think I've seen any other questions, and I would like to leave it there. Thanks.
Arnold, Susan and Arnold and Nicholas, can I say something? With your permission, moderator.
You can do. I'm still seeing they're setting up the screen, so you can intervene.
Yes, thank you so much. And that's a very good presentation, and I hope you can hear me. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate the discussions, and I love that you are all fired up to engage further. However, let me just start on saying this, because it hurts me when, especially we, the people who've been engaging in climate change for some time, and we are still engaging in the same ideas that we used to engage back in 2013, back in 2014, back in 2015 after the Paris Agreement. One thing you realize, Arnold, and all the climate finance experts in the room, is that in the early formations of GCF, one thing that was a challenge was that there was a challenge with accessing the GCF funds because of the bankability of the project, and the guys were complaining that the process has been made to be hard just for African and developing countries not to access the funds. The GCF solved it. It came up with the simplified, the SAP process. whereby if you're applying less than 10 million US dollars, you don't need to have like a background data and all those things. You just need to fill a form. So long as your data is correct and verified, you can get the money. Now we are now shifting to, but adaptation is not being funded enough. It's now mitigation. My brothers and sisters, I just want to tell you the truth. And I want to applaud what ADS is doing, what YWCA is doing, what NCCK is doing, because for ground, that's at the grassroots, what are you doing? That's what is going to matter, because a lot of organizations are applying for these funds. A lot of banks, including our own KCB that has just been accredited, I'm sure it's going to apply to get a huge chunks of funds or loans, or however much it's going to get. But it's going to boil down to what are you doing at the grassroots? Because majority of us have applied, we've gotten the funds. In the past 5 years, it's been a period whereby it's been a policy formulation, whereby you have a climate change bill, you have a climate change policy, you have a climate finance. And if you really look back, a lot of counties, a lot of countries globally have set up climate change bills, climate change. So in the governance structure, UK aid and the other development partners and bilateral partners have really done a lot on that. We are going to move, and this is my prediction as a young climate expert. We are going to move to a period whereby donors are going to go back to the ground, like the 1980s before I was born, the 1970s. What is happening to the ground? And they're going to look for people who are really doing something on the ground. And that puts AKS, ACT Kenya Forum at a very good vantage point, because we have grassroots organizations that are doing something. When we were introducing ourselves, I had of ACT Kenya South Rift, YWCA Mombasa, YWCA Kisumu, and all those other things. So I say this, the policies that are there at the international level, if we look at the international level, we will lose sight, because our governments and our negotiating blocks are looking at the international the UNFCCC from a donor point of view. Whoa, we were hurt by climate change effects, but we did not contribute, so we need to be helped. Let's keep our actions at the ground. The second thing that I want to say is, if you look at what is happening at the ground, the biggest source of climate finance response is actually internal sources. And I'm glad that Arnold mentioned that the Ending Drought Emergencies, the EDE under the NDMA, National Drought Management Authority, the government has really been doing a lot, because we cannot wait for a GCF fund or an adaptation fund or a least development countries fund to respond to some of the challenges that we are facing as a developing country. And that's why you see, yes, when you go to the negotiation table at the international, at the COP, we are not going to say that we've invested a lot on climate change internally, because whenever there's drought or there are floods, the government budget goes. So I dare to say that a lot of financing that goes into climate response is internal. But that one, we are meant to think that, we are not doing so much on climate change. So please, I beseech you to change your mindset. The last thing that I'll say is, ACT Kenya Forum used to be one of the strongest ACT members back then. And I'm saying this because I rose through the ranks of Road to COP 17. That was the Durban Caravan, the cycling caravan in 2015. And then 2017, we did the Big Shift campaign. Please let us not relent on our work, because we are really strong in terms of movement building, and we may have been silent, but I'll seek that the leadership and the conveners to revive the movement to be more stronger, like it was in 2014, 15, 16, and 17. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Nicholas, are we ready to go to the next session?
Yeah, I think we can go to the next session, having heard the responses from the participants and also the response from the facilitator. So yes, now let us proceed to the next one.
Great. Thank you so much. I think for those who did not attend this meeting today, those of us who were there yesterday and missed out on this, they have really missed out on insightful information. I believe that in terms of just looking at the desired outcomes or results from this meeting, I want to believe that everybody can attest to the fact that on the first outcome, desired outcome, and that is increased knowledge on climate discourse at grassroots, national, regional, global level, I think the presenters have done a wonderful job in just bringing us up to speed with everything that is happening. It's a lot, and condensing it in less than a day, actually, because it was 2 half days, is really taking it, stretching it too much. But I think I want to imagine that each of us, there's something that you're coming out from this workshop with in terms of something new, something interesting, something that will challenge you, that is, motivating you now to really go forward. And I think at the back of our minds, let us remember that what Reverend Mutie told us yesterday, we are grounded in the Word of God, and the Word of God requires us, actually commands us to take charge of the earth, and also on everything that is living on the earth. And therefore, it is our duty and our responsibility to preserve, protect, safeguard the environment. And so really, thanks, Stefan. I see you have to leave, but thank you so much for that. So I think now, once we have all this information, we have information about the policy landscape at global level, national level, I think even some at county level. We have seen the video showing what people are doing, what counties are doing. We have heard about how to do social movements and why it is important, and some of the requisite things that we need to look at. We have seen, the broad financial environment that is available for us, and some of the challenges really that go with that. And I really like the fact that it was clarified. Why is it that Asian countries and Europe are getting the funding and not African countries? And it boils down to governance. It boils down to our own governance, our reporting, and even I think aspects of accountability. And so what does it tell us as faith communities? So this session that we are going to is really now looking at getting the other 2 outcomes that we really desired from this workshop. And that is to get a working document to lead our faith community engagement, and also explore what are the partnerships, or what form of engagement do we want? What kind of a partnership do we want to be established out of this? And we are divided into 3 groups. And really these groups, I will attest to that we did random selection. So if you find yourself in one group or another, it doesn't really, it doesn't mean that you're either an expert in that group, but I think everybody can be able to contribute to the group that they are in. And I just want to share some of the questions that we are looking at. Just confirm to me if you see that screen. Any confirmation, anyone?
Yes, just
okay.
Make it slide mode.
Yeah, okay. All right, so there you are. So we have 3 groups, and each group will be led by Dixon. Dixon, you're in the house. Thank you so much for the technology support. You will advise us on how you are taking us to the breakaway groups or breakaway rooms online. So I will let you give us that once we share these questions, so that you just advise us on how that is done. I have 0 idea. So group 1, and when you look at the questions, they are built around emerging prevailing challenges, and then interrogating what the role of the faith community is in mitigating the challenges, and what are the possible strategies around that particular issue. And when you look at the topics, adaptation, resilience, building work is critical, because yes, we know that climate change has many aspects on it, mitigation, and also the new baby in the house, the loss and damage. However, I think even from the various discussions and what Arnold insisted, is that we realize that for African countries, or least developed countries, we are more of the partakers of the threat and the risks and the dangers, really. We are the ones emitting the least emissions, and yet we suffer the most in terms of the consequences of climate change. And therefore, adaptation and resilience building is critical for us. And so that group one, which will be led by Sharon Kibor, I believe she's in the house, Sharon, you'll be leading this group in discussing the climate change adaptation challenges experienced by the poor, marginalized, and vulnerable in the society, and just looking broadly at our areas of influence, our areas of where we are located, and then interrogate the role that the faith communities can play in mitigating the above mentioned challenges around adaptation. So adaptation is the key theme around that group to look at, and then what are the possible strategies that the faith community can undertake in responding to climate change. Kindly, as you look at number 3 especially, and all of it, but number 3 especially, look at the areas about the gender dynamics as well, the dimensions around gender, and any other diversities that you want to include in that. So in terms of the group definitions or the membership for group 1, for those who are here, please note where your name is. Again, as I said, this was really random. There was nothing to it, no thinking around it, no concept note and everything. It was just random. But we tried to ensure that each category of organization, at least there's a representation in each of the groups. So you'll find like NCCK, ADS, and NCCK will be more in most of the groups, because thank God for them, they have really brought in a good participation in numbers. So kindly look at that and just note yourselves: Lydia Muithia, if you're here, Mary Naikum, Joseph, Kingori, Peter, Sophia, Caroline, LWF, Reverend Nalelio. Just note yourself in what group you're in. And then that group is led, as I said, by Sharon. So Sharon will be leading that group. And then for group 2, we are looking at the finance and policy work. This group is led by George of NCCK. And again, the same questions about the challenges around the climate finance, and some of them have been mentioned in the chat, you know, as Arnold was discussing this. What are some of those climate finance and policy challenges that are directly affect the poor money? What are the challenges that in us accessing finances, for instance? What are the policy gaps that there might be? And the role of the faith communities in responding, and then how can we provide thought leadership around those 2 elements. And here this group is actually going to look at policy practice, finance, and partnerships. So George, you will lead that group in that discussion, and the members for that group are those ones in the screen. Please take note of that, of where you are, you are put in, so that you can also try as much as possible to save on time in terms of moving from one room in quotes to the other. So Mercy Maina, DKH, and Stephen Areba, LWF, and then we have people from FCA, ADS again, and DKH and all that. Please look at where you are. And then we have the third group. Third group is led by Charles Masharia, ADS, and we are looking at sustainable energy. And these topics were really critical, again, because of our context. And so the same sequence falls these questions, challenges, the role of faith communities, and the strategies or approaches. So you'll be guided more by your leaders in that group. And for that group, we have the following members. Again, look at yourself and see where you're placed. Now, in case you do not see yourself in any of these groups, kindly you can just choose which group you want to go into, because I'm sure that most of us are really allocated a group, but kindly choose a group. Make sure you participate in this group work, because it's really critical, you know, in terms of just helping us think about the way forward. We want to give each other, because these are not really very many questions, we want to give each other 30 minutes to go into your groups. Once you settle in the groups, 30 minutes to discuss these questions, and then let's get back, and then you'll have identified someone who can give us a quick overview of the discussions that you have had in your group, and then we will move to the next session. So, but this is, for me, is really the critical. This is where we call the rubber meeting the road really session, because this is where we want to achieve outcome 2 and 3 of our workshop. Any questions around that? Otherwise, I'll ask Dixon to take us through how then do we go into these groups.
Just a question, Lillian.
Yes.
Of course, we're seeing people already saying they're not in a group. We need to take into consideration. Edna is saying that she's not in any group. She begs to join group 1. Killian is requesting to join group 3. Just to take into account.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, I said that for those who might not see their names in that group, kindly just advise us on which group you want to join, because then you'll be led by Dixon on how to join that particular room. Thanks so much, Sharon, for that notification.
Yes.
Any other? Thank you so much. Any other question? We want to save on time, 30 minutes. We should be back by latest 12. Because then you take a very brief break, pick your tea, take a health stretch, and then get into your groups. Let's have everybody, please, in the groups. Who is not in any group?
Kindly, I had stepped out a minute,
Mm-hmm.
and I did not know which group I belong to. This is Marcus Chege.
Marcus Chege. Okay, that is group 1. I don't see your name there. Marcus Chege, number 8, group 2.
Group 2, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, my name is Kelly Robert Banda. I've not been situated in any group. Kindly advise.
Okay, so you can join group, there's someone who joined group 1 and 3. Can you join group 2, Kelly?
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
Group 2, okay. Right, I believe that everybody else has seen where the name is. If not, just get back to us. And you can choose any group now, really, the one that you like. Dixon, are you there so that you can lead us on this session, how to do the breakaways?
Thank you, Lillian. Now we have 30 minutes to be done with the group works. The way we've organized each members, all of us will be going into a particular group, and after 30 minutes, of course, in the group you'll see the group leaders and the other people that you'll be joining. Who will be joining in those groups. Then after 30 minutes, we'll put a countdown, a 1-minute countdown that will prompt you to prepare to come back to the main sessions. And yeah, in case of anything, just put your questions in the chat. I'll be able to sort you out there.
Okay. So are you giving us a link or something, or how do we go to those groups?
No, I'll just effect it automatically. Then you'll join your groups automatically.
Oh, automatically?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see a link, then you'll accept the request.
Okay, so it will be on the chat, the link.
No, yes. No, not on the chat. You'll just see it on your screens. Yeah.
Oh, on our screens?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess you're ready for that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Dixon, we have Jonathan, Katana, and Dondoni Wycliffe. We can also put them to group 3.
Okay, so I see that Dixon is putting the link. So you just click on the link. So Dixon, as each member joins, the participants in this main group are reducing, right? Okay, welcome back, members. I'm hoping all groups are back and represented in the main room.
Yes, we are back, Lillian.
Charles, your team is back. George, your team is back.
My team is back, Lillian. I can see Jeremiah and Peter, so you should be back.
And who else? George?
We are back because we are part of his team.
Oh, okay, great, great. Okay, thank you so much. And I think I want to thank Dixon again for just leading us in that session and ensuring that sorry, there was a little disruption there. Ensuring that we are all back, and I hope that the discussions were good and that we have something that we can be able to briefly share. So I want to take this opportunity to just ask members of the group to give key highlights in terms of what were the things that you shared, but focusing mainly on what you think that as a group we need to do. So very briefly on the challenges, and but more on the what we need to do as faith communities. May I start with Charles's group?
Okay, so we are ready, Lillian.
Yes.
Only that I'm not able to project from my end. So kindly give us a few minutes, we send it to the central place, to the host.
Okay.
Lillian?
Yes,
are
yes.
we together?
Yes, we are together. Do you want me to wait for you, or we ask somebody else to go? Yeah, as we wait for Charles and his team. Michael, ninakuona sana. I see you very well. Kaduya, Kaduya. Stop enjoying me.
Yes.
I'm indeed analog, but I'm in between analog and digital. So if there's a word like a Sheng word for it. Okay.
Sorry, Lillian, we had some technical challenge on our end, but we have shared the presentation with the host. So kindly another group can start off as we load ours.
All right. I see.
Lillian, I have shared. Yeah.
Finally, it's here. Thank you.
Great. So someone to take us through quickly, especially the last two questions. What are those key highlights?
Okay. So you want...
Just in 3 minutes.
Okay. So the challenges that we have identified is a combination of limited adaptation of the technology, limited access to finance, limited knowledge, limited infrastructure, limited policy, technology gaps, high operational cost to utilize the grid, and limited alternatives. So the challenges have been phrased in a way that we are then providing the solutions. So in number 2, what can the faith community do? We had a lot of good suggestions to use the church as a platform for raising awareness. For example, to use announcements during Sunday service to raise awareness amongst the congregants on alternatives to fossil fuels. Also use churches as sites of demonstration. So the churches become an example to the community. They sort of walk the talk. churches as sites of dialogue on climate change adaptation and mitigation, enhance access to finance, which could be to actually provide good quality products in close collaboration with local entities that provide access to finance, like chamas, self-help groups, livelihood groups that have VSLAs, or it could be and church to access funds to aid communities access sustainable energy solutions. Again, that could be through giving out loans with small interest. Resource mobilization for demonstrating best options. That could be, for instance, to solarize church institutions, and then also influence policy frameworks in Kenya. The third, focusing more on innovative approaches, would be to influencing policy framework, use churches to influence adaptation of clean energy solutions, work more closely with SACCOs and other means of financing at the very local level, work with groups passionate about climate change and support them in their interest, in their needs on the ground, capacity building of opinion leaders on sustainable energy solutions, grow care for creation and environmental stewardship as part of the identity of being church and a Christian, and church to lead in discussions of events such as World Environment Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think very insightful ideas there, and the challenges well identified. To go to, in terms of going forward, any person from another group who thinks there's something that has been left out of that presentation, very precisely? Anything that other members of the other groups think should be added into that document? Going 1, 2, I don't see any hand up. So, all right, great. Thank you so much, group Charles's group, for that presentation, and thank you, Catherine. Group number 2.
Lillian, let me share for group number 1.
Okay, all right, you have group number 1, that's fine.
Yeah.
For group number 1, in the first question, we got quite a number of challenges there. Inadequate capacity to respond to climate change impacts, lack of access to sources of clean energy, limited participation in planning and implementation processes in resilience activities. The voices of vulnerable are not heard. They need to be amplified. Climate risks, livelihoods, and threatens their livelihood impact. We have marginalized resistance to change, where we have, because of the overdependence on one source of livelihood, in areas where there is adoption of new ways of life, there is lack of information on proper technologies and practices. We have cultural beliefs and practices related especially to pastoralism, donor dependency, conflict, and insecurity. These ones inhibit the access. Challenges because of lack of awareness and capacity building that come with best sustainable adoption methods. Our communities have no awareness on funding opportunities to support the adaptation initiatives. Change of attitudes. We need change of attitudes to embrace diversification and adaptation, and there is no public participation to share ideas and guide the activities. So you find most of them just individual activities by different organizations. Our role, therefore, as faith community should be to sensitize and create awareness, because as faith communities, we are believed and heard. The religious leaders are believed and heard, and the teachings are appreciated. Involvement of the community in project cycle management for ownership and sustainability. Sometimes they are not properly involved. Mobilization for communities and congregants to participate in planning and budgeting processes. Sensitizing the political leaders to be aware of issues of climate change and advocating on prioritizing the climate adaptation and resilience building. Participate in fundraising to support government and have our own fundraise for climate adaptation projects. Then the possible strategies that we can have include capacity and diversification of livelihoods with community, of course, with community participation. Then capacity building of religious leaders on issues of climate change to enable them mainstream climate change issues in their ministries. Then building capacities of communities on diversification of sources of livelihoods and positive coping mechanisms. Capacity strengthening of communities to participate. Then women and children need to be targeted with adoption interventions. And then we can advocate for policy change at both national and county levels that promote sustainable activities in tandem with climate change. Awareness building on the links between environmental degradation to disasters and climate change, ecosystem-based approach to climate change adaptation. Religious leaders can use their spaces during sermons to advocate for climate change, encouraging different groups in the church to have climate change action initiatives. Then dialogue on good environmental protecting practices and adapting green energy. Annual campaigns that are targeted for different outcomes, e.g. 2021, planting 10,000 trees, yes, etc. Individual responsibility of citizens to act. Then creating sitting or platforms to hear the views of the community members and actions to take towards climate change risks. Say the community residents, because they are the residents, they understand their locality well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Some of the things that are coming out are clearly things that Group 1 has already mentioned, areas of sensitization, that is really a critical area. And let's all look out for some of the cross-cutting things that we can actually bank on. So the last but not least, the group, is it Group 2 now? Group 2?
Yes, I'll just read through.
Yes.
Don't know if I'll just read through. On the first question, what are the climate finance and policy challenges that directly affect the poor, marginalized, and vulnerable in the society? The first challenge is limited climate financing to meet the identified needs. And on that note, there's also the general lack of awareness of the public, the marginalized community, about what is available, what are the existing policies. But in that breath, there's also the aspect that the communities are not being involved and are being brought in at the tail end of project inception. Then another challenge in climate finance and policy is poor reporting from ongoing projects and mismanagement of available resources, leading also to corruption. Then there's donor-led policies where the focus is on consultants, and we don't get participation from the communities. And then there's limited capacity to develop bankable projects, project proposals for funding. What role can the faith community play in response to the above mentioned challenges? there is the faith groups can play a big role in breaking the community beliefs and cultural attachment to climate issues. Then there's capacity development. Faith community can promote capacity building of communities in the areas of climate change. Then there is also raising funds at local levels to support community-led initiatives and not relying on donors. And then there's also participating climate change action-oriented community activities such as tree planting. On question 3, how can the faith community provide thought leadership in policy practice, finance, and partnerships? The group agreed that the churches have capacity to synergize efforts in regards to partnerships, and the faith community have an ethical and moral duty to ensure that policies are in line with human rights. And the faith community can also mobilize partners in support for initiatives and offer leadership for community-led interests groups to advocate for climate change initiatives, and mobilizing and facilitating the citizens towards local climate change initiatives. That is it from group 2.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very enriching thoughts there from all the groups. Very interesting ideas as well. I think in terms of just so we have all this information, so asking ourselves what next? What next question? I want to invite Rosalind Pepela to just take us through, give us a wrap up of this session. What are the key thoughts that are coming out of this session, of the presentations, and how does she see ourselves then moving forward from here? And then after Rose Pepela, Rosalind we'll have Macharia giving us the closing remarks and lead us into a word of prayer. Rosalind. You may need to unmute if you're talking. Rosalind. Okay, all right. That's fine. That's okay, Rosalind. We'll continue with that. So I think from the presentations, the challenges are clear, and the role of the faith community, is coming out. A number of things around capacity building, around sensitization. Most importantly, I think role modeling, that we should be the ones leading the way in terms of even just changing our habits and practice. Doing, participating in critical events at that local level. So a number of things have come out. But I think the question for us then is to ask ourselves, in terms of this group, the faith group that we have, this community that is here, what are those 3 key things then you think we should do in terms of moving forward? And this, I want to leave it to the plenary, looking at the presentations and asking ourselves, what is it then we should do as a faith community? This group that is seated here today, what should we do in terms of moving forward? Remember what some of the advice that we had been given, or some of the suggestions that came out from yesterday's presentation. There was someone who talked about what about building a community of practice. Another one, what about a movement? What kind of movement would we have? There was, I think, somebody who also mentioned something to do with how to engage the government in terms of situating our space or getting our space within the forums that are ongoing. So really, there's so much that we can do. And looking at what we have already presented, what do you think, members, are those things that we can concretely say as a group we need to consider? And remember, this is a first conversation. It's not something that you can say we'll consider this and do it from tomorrow. It's something that will help us start building really a good strategy of engagement. So I open this up to all of us just to give that practical key things. Our role, we know the challenges, but what is our role and what is the strategy we need to engage in? I open it up to anyone. I can see hands up. You can raise your hand, or you can also just unmute yourself and request to speak. And we want to do this in 10 maximum minutes so that we can be able to close before 1 o'clock. I know people in some areas need to, to perhaps go and pray, or the electricity will be going off. It's an open discussion. Otherwise, I'll start calling out names. Are we together? Am I communicating? Reverend Misoi, what are your thoughts? As this group, what do you think we should, how do you think we should move forward?
Okay, Lillian, let me just say something.
Thank you so much.
Way forward is that all these proposals and all what we have put across, we should implement them so that it will be okay. Because we can put down those strategies and leave it that way. But what is supposed to be done now is to implement. So that is my suggestion.
Okay, thank you so much. That is Jeremiah?
Chebi.
Chebi, great. Thank you so much for that. And maybe I just want to challenge you a little bit, Chebi, so that we can even move forward. What is that one thing you think we can do together as a team?
Well,
there's so many things that have been discussed.
Almost all of them are to be done, because if we cannot, let me say one of them is giving information.
Yes.
Two is teaching or informing our members concerning the climate change, because most of our people doesn't know what we mean by even that climate change.
Yes.
Or destroying the environment. So the main thing which we are supposed to do is to inform our people concerning climate change, even in the villages.
Yes.
Because most of the destructions are found even in the villages.
Very true.
Yes.
Thank
so
you.
Education
is critical.
Yes.
And as most of the members mentioned, that we should use our platforms, our various platforms to actually educate the community. Thank you so much, Chebi. Anybody else? Anyone else? Thomas?
Lillian,
yes.
Can I come in?
Please do.
I think for me, just thought that one way forward is having such meetings, maybe also where we can update each other on progress, what each organization has managed to achieve, so that we have a check and balance for whether there is any progress in what we are doing. So such a forum would be good once in a while, just within us to know what is the progress. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Caroline. Yeah, so that we can have a sustained conversation with this group and maybe just expand it a little bit. Thank you so much. Anyone else in terms of way forward, what you think we can do going forward?
Hi, Lillian.
Yes, hi.
I wanted to suggest that one of the things that we could also consider is to have I don't know the correct word to use, like some sort of interreligious working group that would be focusing on those critical things that we want to do. And one of the things could be through that working group, we could see which of the movements that exist that we could work with. And I'm saying this based on the presentation from Arnold and the discussions around it.
Yes.
Which of the movements that are there that we can align with the things that we believe in, the things that we stand for, that we could plug into and be part of, and work through that working group to establish that and now be part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sharon, for
Just,
that.
Lillian, can I come in? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. And I see also Charles and Katrine. Your hands are raised up.
Okay.
So before
maybe Katrine and Charles can go first.
Yes. That's what I wanted to ask. Katrine, Charles.
Yeah. I think that I would like. Sorry. I would like to actually say two things, if I'm allowed. One is that I really do believe we need to form a movement here in Kenya in order to really make a difference. In Mwangaza and the Anglican Church has worked together now for about 2 years, and we can see that the Green Anglicans movement is now picking up. We're trying to give it more substance and sort of content on the ground. There's a huge interest everywhere we go. And I think that is also what we would find in other churches. With NCCK, Mwangaza worked with NCCK to grow the Green Churches initiative, but it has not really picked up. We are also in conversation with the Interreligious Council, and so everywhere we go, we see there's a lot of interest, but there's the question is how do we do it? And I think that if we were a number of people who were willing to actually set up a working group with that objective to explore how can we actually grow a green movement, and how can that green movement, for example, access the carbon financing funding that we also learned about this morning, and so that is one thing. The other thing, I think that it's very important to connect the awareness raising with improved access to affordable solutions. Otherwise, we leave people with awareness of something they cannot actually put that awareness into practice. So I think we should link awareness raising, access, and affordability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that really emphasizes what Sharon has talked about. How do we engage in a movement kind of thing? So, and you go ahead and say, why don't we set up a working group to actually then define this, to help us synthesize all this information that we have and come up with really practical steps and the how to, because the how to is really important. Thank you so much. And I like the idea about sensitization is one thing, but affordability, and we've seen that is really a challenge. Awareness and just moving from using charcoal to some, stove many people are not really, how do we ensure that this is something that can be moved? Thank you so much around as Catherine on that. Very insightful. I don't see any other hands, so I want to call.
Excuse me, Lilian.
Yes.
Can I also go?
Areba, thank you.
Okay. Eventually, we may think of how we can mobilize resources and to implement joint projects on climate change in the future. Yeah.
Yes. Great.
Okay.
Yes. Mobilize resources together and implement climate change. Great. Great. Thanks so much, Steve, for that as well. Anyone else? I'm looking out before we go to Arnold. And then, and if there's anything on the chat, please just advise me. Susan and Sharon, Linda. Okay.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do have something on the chat
Yes,
box.
Please do. In terms of suggestion.
There are suggestions. We have the church community should slot in information on climate change in all their weekly notices and posters. In their notice boards, the churches in rural areas should plant trees or fruits within their places of worship. We could also have a working group and alert the group on threats and opportunities. Create a card of youth catalysts with knowledge and skills to participate effectively. And then we could special deliberate effort to involve the youth and women in our various organizations.
Yeah.
And then a vibrant collective action by ACT on the available opportunities, more capacity building for the CSOs in the spaces. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really nice.
A final one, do we have another planned meeting on climate change for continuation of the discussion?
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I think that's a challenge and something that Caroline was asking also in terms of how do we sustain this dialogue so that it doesn't just end today. It's not a one-off event. Climate is continuing. So this conversation, the climate change is going on, and we cannot have impromptu discussions. We have to have a sustained engagement. So thank you so much. I think those are really insightful feedback. It feels that this thing about the movement is really coming out, and therefore there's a need to identify a group of people to take us through deeply into this discussion. So start thinking about yourselves because we'll be asking for volunteers in a short while, those who would like to participate in this working group. If we can get at least between 7 people, I think that would be a small, nice, lean group to discuss this further. Thank you so much. Arnold, you had something you wanted to share with us as we take this thing away?
Actually, just very briefly, it's in line to what Sharon had said about AKF playing a convening role of other interreligious networks. So AKF could actually begin convening other interfaith and on issues around climate justice. And then once that is set up, and I believe that will be the key task for the new team that we're saying are going to form, then that group can officially reach out to government processes. It's not sometimes just good to have conversations within yourselves, how we need to care for the creation and everything. Yes, but once we get that group forming, and then we can reach out. This group can be the strategic engagement partner for government and other processes that are going on. That would be just supporting Sharon's point of AKF playing the convening role of others, because there's no such platform that exists for faith in the country. That would be very powerful, in addition to what my wonderful colleagues have said as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think this brings us to a place where we feel, yes, indeed, we do have a document that from this session that provides ideas of what needs to be done, what are the challenges, what is our role in climate change discourse, what strategies should we engage in. And I think in terms of going forward, we kind of have a consensus that there's need to have a small group that really looks into this all these presentations that we have received, that then takes us to the next level. When do we then have the next meeting where we can share this document or working document really that will have been identified by the small task force? And then from there, that will make very critical suggestions in terms of practical way forward that will involve all of us, both at individual level, but also as a collective. I really loved the ideas about the inserts, you know, in the church leaflet and all that. We can even perhaps think of an international quote unquote day of climate for the faith. You know, all those things are really practical things that we can really sustain engagement. So I want to close it there and just thank you so much, everyone, for the active participation. I hope that these 2 days have been insightful to all of us. And I really urge AKF to continue this role in convening us, LWF being part of it. And just in terms of moving forward, that let us not stop here. Let this be the beginning of more discussions and more conversation around this agenda. To wrap us up, I would like to call on Charles Macharia, who is the chairperson of the Advocacy Working Group, which is a working group within the ACT Kenya Forum. We have humanitarian and development working groups, but this particular working group is the one that was leading this workshop because we believe that advocacy is key in this climate change agenda. So that he can give us his closing remarks, tell us what he sees in terms of way forward, and then lead us in a word of closing prayer. But before that, let me just thank everyone, and particularly I want to thank Arnold. I think you have really taken your time, and members, just to know that Arnold is really doing this out of good faith. You know, it's not a consultancy or anything like that. He's just doing it out of passion. So we really appreciate you, and Arnold, for stepping in and taking this role really seriously. I want to thank Catherine for your very useful remarks yesterday, the gender dimension, and then just giving options around sustainable energy. Nicholas, thank you so much. The governance issues, but also just giving us the active role in terms of the Kenyan discourse and the Kenyan perspective. Thomas Lerenten, I think really gave us all the information around what the government is doing, and giving himself a commitment that he's open to reach out to him and for that engagement. So we already have what I think Arnold's talked about, the political, who is the political person we want to engage with. So we already have some inroad there that we can engage around the politics or political discussions. We had, who else? We had Macharia, of course, giving us the opportunities around what we can do. And I think that has informed a lot of what we are talking about today. We had George leading the teams today, one of the groups that was there. We had Reverend Mutie giving us that basic background as to why we need to do this, why we must actually do this as Christians, because we are saving the world from burning out, literally. We are contributing to ensuring that the world doesn't burn out. Otherwise, if we don't take action, we'll be an extinct species in the near future. Joanne from CEDA, sharing what their plans are and how they engage in this discourse and what can be done, and perhaps even opening up that conversation or channels of communication between us and CEDA to see how maybe they can also support us around climate change. Stefan giving us advice and good ideas around climate agriculture, the smart agriculture options that they are there, how the youth should be engaged, and just challenging us and saying that this this discussion is long overdue. We should have discussed this earlier, but now we are here. We need to really move forward. And I thank Elizabeth for just giving us the grounding of where ACT Alliance as an alliance is. So all these people have really built into this workshop and given us really good ideas and insights. But without each one of us, the participants, we really we would not have had a workshop. So for each of you, really, I thank you and I ask that God will bless you and show you the way in terms of where to do, what to do, and how to go about changing the space that you live in, because this is also individual responsibility and we need to really change that as well. So thank you so much. And I just want to then give, because I'll not speak again, I wish you all a blessed afternoon and the rest of the week. And then Charles Macharia, you can take us now to the end.
Okay, thank you, Lillian. And I'll be very brief. From the planning team, I've been requested to ask that we take a group photo. So in just 1 minute, I kindly request all of us to just turn on our mic, our videos, and then the event host would take a group photo. Then from there, I'll give my brief remarks.
Okay. There we are.
Let me remove this.
And thank you so much, Dixon, once again. Even that future ambassador should be seen.
Yes.
That climate future ambassador should be seen.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Are we on? Okay.
Just one last one. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Just to give my quick remarks, I want to appreciate all the participants for the commitment in climate change discourse in Kenya and beyond. We also appreciate the dedication and active participation in this workshop. It has been a great time of learning together. Sorry, Aremba, kindly switch off your mic. Okay. Fine. Am I on? Yes. Okay. So thank you. Sorry for that disruption that was there. So we appreciate our time together for the last 2 days. It has been a great moment for learning and discovering the many opportunities that we have to strengthen and deepen and amplify the impact of our work. Thank you all for being very candid in the discussions, and I believe that the work of AKF is clearly cut out. And to the facilitators, you have been very kind to us and very selfless. And I believe that all the facilitators are willing to continue being available and open to collaborate with the AKF. So I would encourage that we reach out to them in case you have any area that you would want to have continued discussions. And we are always there to help you link up just in case you have any challenge. So we look forward to continued collaboration, and we promise to reach out to you once more on how we can continue to deepen our action and joint resource mobilization. We all agree that we cannot afford to lose this race of reclaiming our planet. And I want to affirm that God is counting on you and me to reclaim our planet. So we are very grateful. Thank you all, and God bless you. In our midst, we have been having Bishop Musa Kamuren. He's one of the top faith leaders in the country, and he's also a member of World Council of Churches, and he's a climate change ambassador. When you are doing mobilization for COP21 and raising the petitions, we are glad that he helped us so much to raise the required petitions. So we kindly request Bishop Musa Kamuren to offer for us the last prayer or the closing prayer. You can also share with us some words of wisdom, very briefly, even as you bless us, our Lord Bishop.
So as we pray, I want to ask each one of us, let us do it in a small way, in our own ways, at our places of stay, as we reclaim our environment and doing that which will change our places of work. God will move many into doing that. So may the Lord bless you, and shall we pray? We want to thank you, God, for who you are. You are our creator. You are the one who has put us in this place, in this world, so that we may continue improving on our environment. Help us, Lord, to be faithful to your creation, to love it and to do it in such a way that it benefits us and others. We want to thank you, Lord, for this meeting that we have discussed so many things. And we are praying that may these things we have discussed come out to be good fruits for future, so that our generation and our posterity will enjoy a very good environment and a climate that favors, that is what we want to do, which is good. We commit ourselves, we commit the resources, we commit all our cares unto your care, God, because in you only we shall find a solution. And we pray asking you to take care of us, even with diseases like COVID, with the things which are dangerous to our lives. Protect us, Lord, and keep us safe until we meet again. And we want to thank you because you are faithful and you love us. We pray for each one of us as some of us will be traveling to different places, as we undertake other activities, be with us. And all in all this, God, we pray and we say, may all the glory be yours and blessing to us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Okay, so we thank all of you. God bless you.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Amen.
May I request the planning team to just remain on for a short update? The planning team, Linda Sharon Kibor. Yeah, there you are, future ambassador. Bye.
Stefan, how are you? I'm very good, and thank you for joining in yesterday and also today.
Thank you so much. Planning team, please remain behind.